19 years ago, a group of 18 boarding school students vanished during a school night field trip, disappearing completely in the Arizona desert, leaving their families shattered in panic and grief. Authorities at the time declared there were no signs of criminal activity, closing the investigation despite finding no bodies, no bus, and virtually no clues strong enough to explain the collective disappearance. However, over the long years that followed, one member of the initial response team, who had personally witnessed reports being altered and evidence overlooked, never gave up the belief that the truth had been concealed. Then one day, from what seemed like a random discovery, a small detail buried under the hot Arizona soil suddenly came to light, a detail powerful enough to overturn the entire case and shock everyone involved in a way no one could have anticipated. Before diving deeper into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you like the video, don't forget to subscribe. Copper Canyon, Arizona, in 2006 was a small town nestled on the edge of the Superstition Mountains, where towering red rock formations and arid valleys created a rugged terrain stretching for miles. The desert at night in autumn turned suddenly cold, with winds carrying fine dust and the distinctive smell of creosote typical of Arizona. The area's crime rate back then was not high but erratic, a few scattered disappearances on desert routes, sometimes attributed to accidents, sometimes fading into unexplained darkness. Amid that harsh landscape, Clearwater Ridge Agricultural Academy stood as the last resort for many poor families in the region. The small boarding school, built from old brown bricks, taught agricultural skills, where most students came from struggling working-class communities around Copper Canyon. The majority of the kids lived far from their parents, with limited social contact, and the school was essentially their only world throughout the school year. On the afternoon of September 19, 2006, a group of 18 students was selected to participate in an extracurricular program in Phoenix. They boarded the school's yellow bus at 7:10 p.m., carrying small backpacks, light jackets, and trip paperwork. The driver checked the roster, the teacher signed off, and the bus left the school gate, heading along the winding road toward Highway 88. The journey proceeded peacefully until security cameras at the Apache Junction gas station captured the final footage of the bus at 9:12 p.m. The grainy recording, blurred by neon lights and desert wind dust, still showed the bus slowing down as it crossed the station lot, yellow lights reflecting off the windows, with passengers in the back reduced to shadowy silhouettes blending into the darkness behind the vehicle. That footage was marked as the last visual evidence of the entire group of 18 students. According to the schedule, the bus was supposed to return to the school by 10:30 p.m. But as the clock passed that mark and the school grounds remained silent, the on-duty teacher began calling the driver's phone, then each student's. All reported unable to connect. Unease spread quickly through calls among parents, starting with questions, then worry, and finally fear as they realized no one could reach their children. Phones that had been working normally suddenly all went dead, a coincidence too unusual to dismiss. At 9:57 p.m., after nearly half an hour of checking everywhere and calling non-stop, one parent picked up the phone again, hand trembling slightly, and dialed emergency services. When the call at 9:57 p.m. connected to the emergency line, the dispatcher at the Pinal County Dispatch Center immediately activated recording mode and opened the log entry interface. The caller's voice was halting from panic, but key details: 18 students unreachable, bus overdue, all phones off, were quickly classified by the dispatcher as high risk. It took just 7 seconds to select the event code, missing juveniles. High risk marking the incident not as a typical runaway case, but as an emergency situation with potential danger. The first log entry for the case was entered into the system. 18 juveniles unaccounted for, no contact. School bus overdue. After confirming the location and caller's identity, the dispatcher transferred the call to the internal priority line for the Pinal County Sheriff's Office while sounding the alert siren in the night command room. Even as the call continued with the reporter, 2 night patrol units, 2L19 and 2L22, received the information on their MDTs ordered to immediately head to Clearwater Ridge Agricultural Academy to check the scene. The call ended in under 2 minutes, but in that short time, the entire initial response system for Pinal County had been activated. 2 patrol SUVs flashed their amber lights, turned onto the empty highway, and sped straight toward the boarding school, where dormitory lights cast a lone glow in the dark desert. Deputy Harvey, the first to arrive, met the on-duty teacher in the lobby and was led to check each room of the group of students. All beds were empty, with no signs the kids had returned or left unusual belongings. Meanwhile, Deputy Ruiz checked the school's bus parking area, confirming the vehicle used for the trip was completely absent from campus. The 2 deputies tried calling the driver, and each student noting all were out of service at the same time, matching parent statements and heightening the severity. The initial verification process ended with the same conclusion: 18 students had left the school nearly 3 hours earlier, and no one knew where the bus had gone. Around 10:22 p.m., Deputy Harvey reported over radio, negative on student location, negative on bus, possible multi-juvenile missing case. Just minutes later, Sheriff Daniel Cole, who was on duty at PCSO headquarters, drove to campus. He ordered the entire boarding area sealed off, gathered remaining school staff for initial information, and set up a temporary meeting room in the administrative office as the command post. There, scattered data points began to be compiled and entered into the PCSO case file system, amid the tense atmosphere of an incident spiraling out of control. Cole sat down at the unit's laptop, opened the internal terminal, and entered the new case number, CR061472. That moment marked the disappearance no longer being treated as a simple delay or routine search, but officially becoming a county-level investigation, a file that could drag on for years, though no one in that room yet imagined the gravity of what would be uncovered. As soon as case file CR061472 was activated at the command post, the first order was to reconstruct every minute of the lost journey with precision. All data related to the student's trip was demanded to be gathered as quickly as possible. The on-duty teacher was brought into the meeting room, sequentially providing the list of 18 students, departure time at 7:10 p.m., office approval paperwork, and the planned route to Phoenix. The trip driver, still unreachable by phone, had left in the school's vehicle log a registration form noting Route A Phoenix, return expected 10:30 p.m. This information was immediately added to the county's timeline. A school administrative staff member provided the most recent bus maintenance record, confirming no mechanical issues that month, ruling out sudden breakdown forcing a detour. When deputies brought copies from the Apache Junction gas station's CCTV system to the command post, Cole ordered the technician to immediately check the metadata. The 3-minute video only captured a few clear frames due to 2006-era cameras often distorted by neon lights and fast motion, but the timestamp and recording speed data remained accurate: 9 hours 12 minutes and 3 seconds p.m., 9 hours 12 minutes and 27 seconds p.m., 9 hours 12 minutes and 44 seconds p.m. Those 3 appearances confirmed the bus slowing as it crossed the station lot heading south, the correct direction toward Phoenix. Metadata showed no technical anomalies, no edits, and no sudden frame loss, meaning the camera recorded exactly what happened. From this, the 9:12 p.m. mark became the last confirmed sighting of the bus. Another deputy was tasked with contacting major cell providers in the area for the students' final phone pings, but 2006 technology lacked user GPS, relying only on nearby towers. Results showed the last signals from all 18 phones shared the same coverage area between Apache Junction and the start of Highway 88. Final pings occurred between 9:14 and 9:18 p.m., after which all devices went offline. The near-simultaneous loss of 18 phones raised a major question. It couldn't be simultaneous low batteries, nor consistent with normal behavior on a field trip. Cross-referencing all data, Cole ordered a minute-by-minute timeline: 7:10 p.m. Bus leaves school, 8:05 p.m. Bus passes Goldfield Road per a residential guard statement. 8:47 p.m. Phones still active normally. 9:12 p.m. Apache Junction CCTV capture. 9:14, 9:18 p.m. Final pings, 9:30, 9:40 p.m. No traffic cameras record bus on main route, 9:57 p.m. Parent calls 911. All remaining data points together only created a 45-minute gap, with no images or signals explaining where the bus went after 9:12 p.m. Dead zone window, 9:12, 9:57 p.m. was circled in thick red on the timeline board, standing out like a cut in the sequence of events and becoming the only time frame where the incident certainly occurred. From comparing the planned route with the final visual data and remaining phone pings, Cole reached an initial conclusion and recorded it directly in the official report that the bus had not followed the designated route right after leaving Apache Junction. That conclusion immediately shifted the investigation to the next step. If the bus had turned off the route, where had it turned? Based on the newly established timeline, and especially the prolonged gap after the 9:12 p.m. mark, Sheriff Cole ordered the technical team to begin reconstructing all possible routes the bus could have taken, using the best tools available in 2006 printed MapQuest maps, early raw Google Earth terrain data, and the school's prior Phoenix trip route records. From this, 3 scenarios were listed on the meeting table: the main route along Highway 88, then merging into US 60 to Phoenix, a secondary loop through Queen Valley, and a third, rarely mentioned route turning onto Peralta Road branch before heading deep into the Superstition foothills. The first 2 had some traffic, street lights, and scattered traffic cameras. If the bus had taken either, it almost certainly would have additional sightings or witnesses between 9:12 and 9:30 p.m., but checks with the county traffic department showed no bus recorded on those routes after leaving Apache Junction. The third route, Peralta Road, was entirely different. A semi-paved dirt road, narrow, unlit, winding between mountain slopes, typically used only by hikers or local pickup trucks. When the analysis team used early Google Earth to assess lighting and terrain, they noted the junction with Highway 88 was just minutes' drive from the Apache Junction gas station, and at that turn there was a large dark area with no cameras or commercial lights, making it easy to block or force a vehicle without being recorded. From MapQuest, the distance from this turn led straight into Peralta Canyon, where a complex network of small roads could make a large vehicle, like a bus, disappear from view without leaving traces on the main route. Cole marked the Highway 88 and Peralta Road intersection in red, calling it an anomalous junction because on a normal trip, there was no reason for the bus, tasked with reaching Phoenix, to turn onto a dark, unmarked road outside the plan and lose phone signals immediately after. One deputy hypothesized the bus might have been forced to stop right at Apache Junction, with the driver redirected by someone, but this was quickly ruled out, as it didn't match the timing. The camera system showed no incidents or unusual stops as it passed. Instead, a more plausible theory formed in the room: another vehicle, likely a dark-colored SUV mentioned by a witness, appeared right after the final CCTV frame, tailing the bus and forcing the driver to turn left onto Peralta Road. The simultaneous phone signal loss from 9:14 to 9:18 p.m. further supported this scenario, coinciding with when the bus could have entered a no-signal area or had communications deliberately cut. From cross-referencing maps, terrain, and possible turns, Cole noted in the report that Peralta Road was the only route explaining the bus's complete disappearance without any traces on the main Phoenix path. That very conclusion shifted the investigation's focus from maps to the field. As soon as Peralta Road was identified as the most anomalous route, directly tied to the lost time frame from 9:12 to 9:57 p.m., Sheriff Cole ordered the immediate launch of the first search phase under ICS protocol, the standard rescue model for life-threatening situations. The command post at the school office became the temporary coordination point, and from there, Cole directed the SAR team to open Search Block A, a perimeter search covering the entire area around the final CCTV sighting of the bus at Apache Junction. To ensure no signs of the bus stopping or an incident near populated areas were missed, the search radius was set at 3 miles from the gas station, equating to over 7.5 square kilometers of mixed terrain including paved roads, low brush, and open lots. 7 SAR personnel were mobilized at once, divided into 3 teams, each using vehicles and equipment suited to the terrain. 2 teams on ATVs to scan dirt roads along Highway 88, where a large vehicle could hide undetected. The remaining team on foot, combined with observation of dense brush and low rock crevices inaccessible by vehicle. Although 2006 thermal imaging was crude, low resolution, and prone to ground heat interference in the desert, the county helicopter unit still activated it to search for residual heat signatures from the bus body or a concentrated group of people. From above, the pilot reported scattered small heat patches, mostly parked cars in residential yards or large animals, but none large or distinct enough to match a bus over 10 meters long. ATVs surveyed every ridge around the gas station, closely examining tire tracks, looking for sudden brake marks or plastic debris that might have fallen, but the dry ground and strong winds made tracks hard to identify. The foot team checked the entire area west of the station, where a few side paths led to open lots, but found no signs the bus had stopped there. As the SAR team continued sweeping the area per the planned grid, Cole constantly requested radio updates for timely range adjustments if any anomalies appeared. Yet by near midnight, the channels only repeated the same conclusion: no clues directly related to the bus's path. The lack of stop marks, turns, debris, or any evidence within the 3-mile radius of the final CCTV point made the initial assessment clearer. If the bus had an accident, it couldn't have happened here, and if it was forced off course, that occurred right after leaving Apache Junction. Cole wrote directly in the report, "No trace of vehicle within perimeter, likely diverted off main road." This conclusion, combined with the bus never appearing on any traffic cameras after 9:12 p.m., became the first confirmation that it had left the Phoenix route in a direction outside all official paths. It was from that deadlock that Cole decided to go back to the last remaining timestamp before the bus vanished from all surveillance systems. While the SAR team continued to expand the search perimeter outward, he directed 2 deputies to detach from the scene and return to the Apache Junction gas station to exploit the accounts of those present at the time, the last potential witnesses who might have seen the bus. At the checkout counter, the night shift clerk, a middle-aged woman reorganizing sales receipts, confirmed she clearly remembered a yellow bus passing through the station lot around a little after 9 p.m., a detail that matched exactly the 9:12 p.m. timestamp on the final CCTV segment. However, what caught her attention was not the bus itself, but 2 dark-colored SUVs that appeared behind it. They were following too close, she said, like they were trying to tail it. I even thought they might be patrol vehicles, but the lights weren't flashing like police. When the deputy pressed for more details, she described them as large SUVs, the kind used in rural counties, but she couldn't identify the make because it was dark, and the station lot was only well lit around the pump area. Another customer, a man in his 30s when questioned, said he didn't live in Copper Canyon and had only stopped at the station to buy water on his way driving back to Mesa. He hadn't noticed the bus, but did remember a loud shout echoing across the lot. I heard someone yelling something like "pull over," or similar, he said. The voice was sharp, like a commanding voice, the kind an officer or someone used to giving orders would have. The man insisted the sound didn't come from inside the station, but from the far end of the lot, where the lighting was dimmer. When the deputy asked if it could have been a call between passing motorists, he firmly replied, no, because the voice was too loud and carried the tone of someone accustomed to issuing orders on duty. The 2 statements, one about the 2 SUVs tailing, the other about the commanding shout, aligned in timing, and showed no signs of mutual influence, as the 2 individuals were strangers and were interviewed separately. Upon returning to the command post, the 2 deputies brought back a copy of the CCTV footage that had been requested in its full original frames. Though the old camera and the noise from the neon lights made the images hard to analyze, Sheriff Cole ordered the technician to go through every frame, enabling enhanced contrast mode and zooming into the dark areas behind the bus. At that point, In a span of 0.8 seconds, a tiny portion of the frame, the technician spotted a slanted shadow gliding across the right edge of the screen, in the exact position described by the station clerk. The shadow lacked clear detail, but had a square, tall shape, resembling the roof of a large vehicle running close behind the bus. Although the camera quality wasn't sufficient to identify the make or color, the appearance of the shadow combined with the clerk's statement made it clear that the bus was not traveling alone when it left Apache Junction. Another notable detail was that in the very next frame, the bus's taillights cast light onto the ground at an unusual angle, as if illuminated by a light source from behind, consistent with the hypothesis that an SUV had its high beams on while tailing closely. When analyzing the audio from the camera, which only captured background noise, no shout was recorded that the customer had heard. But this was expected since the microphone was housed in a metal box and only picked up sounds in very close range. After correlating the statements, image analysis, and the camera timestamp, Cole entered into the investigation log, possible tailing vehicles detected. 2 dark SUVs. Bus may have been under surveillance or pressure immediately after leaving station. This was the first significant conclusion in case file CR061472, indicating that the bus did not spontaneously deviate from its route to Phoenix. Instead, it had been followed, and possibly interfered with, at the last moment it appeared on camera. Following the preliminary conclusion that the bus had been tailed upon leaving Apache Junction and had likely turned onto Peralta Road, Sheriff Cole ordered the deployment of Search Block B, the expansion phase of the search operation, focusing on the area around First Water Trailhead, where the trails begin to cut deep into the foothills of the Superstition Mountains. The SR team moved to the scene near midnight, carrying USGS-printed topographic maps, high-powered lights, and marking stakes to establish a wide sector grid covering the entire trailhead. Setting up the sector grid here was critical due to the complex terrain: sandy soil, creosote bushes, eroded paths, and numerous branching trails that could cause traces to blend together. SAR divided the area into rectangular cells, approximately 200 x 300 meters, numbered from a 1 to D4, to ensure all search teams knew exactly where they were and which areas had been cleared. The K9 unit was brought in first, as scent dogs can detect human or foreign object trails before the SAR team can spot them visually. The lead dog, an experienced Belgian Malinois, began sweeping for scent from the edge of Peralta Road inward to the trailhead. Within just a few minutes, it changed direction, pulling hard on the leash toward the northeast, where the terrain began to slope gently and the bushes thinned out, indicating that a scent trail had passed through the area not long before. The K9 repeatedly paused at points where the scent was stronger, places sheltered from wind by rocks or bushes, allowing the handler to log the scent dispersion direction and reconstruct a preliminary movement path. These scents could not identify individuals, but their presence, combined with the timing of the loss of contact, made the hypothesis that the bus or its tailing vehicles had entered the trailhead area more convincing. As the K9 led deeper into the sparse woods, the ground search team began detecting large tire tracks. These were not from the bus, which would leave wider and deeper ruts, but belonged to heavy off-road SUVs with large deep-tread tires, matching the station clerk's description of 2 dark SUVs. The deputy specializing in tracks described the tread pattern, a horseshoe shape facing outward, with grooves nearly 1.2 inches deep, the kind commonly found on off-road patrol vehicles or heavy pickups used in desert areas. Estimated wheel size indicated 17-18-inch rims, quite common on early 2000s Ford Excursions or Chevy Suburbans. The direction of travel, based on soil compression, showed movement from west to northeast, aligning with the K9 scent direction. The tire tracks appeared consistently for over 400 meters before disappearing as the terrain shifted to rocky outcrops that didn't retain clear impressions. Notably, Sarah found no evidence that the bus had stopped at the trailhead, no major braking skids, no soil churned up as from a heavy vehicle stopping abruptly, and no fragments of yellow paint or plastic. This reinforced the conclusion that the bus did not park or turn around in this area, but either passed through or was directed deeper inland. One deputy noted a small but important detail. At the edge of a turnoff onto one of the side trails, there was a partial large tire mark, close in size to bus wheels, but only a segment, as if the bus had hugged the edge of the road without stopping. This mark pointed northeast, consistent with the direction indicated by the K9 and SUV tracks. From the wind-faded but still analyzable traces, the SR team constructed a preliminary model. At least one large vehicle had passed through the first water trailhead, and the SUV tracks suggested it was most likely the tailing vehicle. The absence of any stopping marks or dropped physical evidence at the trailhead nearly ruled out the possibility that the bus had broken down there. In the internal report for Search Block B, Cole noted clearly that the bus, though possibly tailed or forced to change direction, continued moving after turning off the main route, heading deeper into the complex terrain of the Superstition Mountains. This conclusion was based on a chain of faint but consistent indicators, the K9 scent direction matching the large SUV tire treads, showing that the convoy did not stop but proceeded into the sparse woods ahead. It was from those results that Cole ordered the search expanded to the connecting dirt roads beyond Peralta Road, aiming to trace the point where the journey might have shifted from voluntary movement to coercion. When the SR team reported the SUV tire tracks leading deep into the sparse woods and confirmed no signs of stopping at First Water Trailhead, the investigation team continued scanning every narrow curve along the route. At a section of road, about half a mile from the trailhead, where the surface sloped slightly down to a compacted dirt area, the group discovered unusual braking skids stretching across the gravel. Upon seeing them, Cole immediately ordered the area isolated and marked as the first crime scene, assigning it the temporary code, Scene #1. These skid marks extended over 45 feet, long enough to rule out a voluntary stop by the driver. The width of the rubber traces matched the tire size of a school bus, approximately 10 inches, and the friction density indicated braking force far greater than typical for slowing on a dirt road. Rubber residue still clung in small patches to the surface, evidence that the tires had slid quickly and forcefully, generating higher than normal heat friction. When the deputy specializing in scene analysis examined the tear angle of the scraped rubber, he noted that the force had caused the tires to lose traction in a rightward deviation, as if the vehicle was forced sideways rather than simply decelerating normally. The skid marks did not run straight, but curved slightly in an arc, a common sign when a driver attempts to steer while the vehicle is impacted from behind or the side. Immediately following the long skid was a deeper drag mark, gouged 3 to 5 centimeters below the surrounding surface, nearly 2 meters long. This drag mark was not created by the bus tires, but by the chassis or side body scraping the ground, sufficient for the deputies to determine that a strong force had impacted the body, causing it to deviate from its forward path. One deputy, measuring with a specialized ruler, observed that the leading edge of the drag was plowed into the compacted soil, indicating the bus was pushed laterally to the right, toward the dirt track opening into a darker area. This characteristic matched a scenario where the bus, while moving, was crowded by a large vehicle, most likely one of the SUVs tailing from the gas station, either pressing against the left side or cutting in front, forcing the driver to steer into the open dirt to avoid direct collision. The soil at the road edge also retained 3 small triangular indentations, whose positions and spacing corresponded to the front structure of a full-size SUV, as if that vehicle had closed in on the bus and applied pushing force to the right. On the ground around the drag mark, small rocks were also displaced in a pattern from west to northeast, matching the direction of the SUV tracks found in Search Block B, further reinforcing the hypothesis that both vehicles followed the same trajectory after turning off Highway 88. Based on the curved shape of the skid marks, Cole concluded that the bus driver had attempted to steer to prevent the vehicle from rolling over while being forced to change direction. Notably, There were no signs that the bus turned around or slowed voluntarily after this scene. Instead, scattered contact points on the ground indicated the vehicle continued into the compacted basin, leading deeper into the trail system. No paint, plastic or metal fragments were found to indicate direct collision between the bus and the tailing vehicle, but this was entirely consistent with a non-contact crowding technique, a method often used to force a large vehicle to change direction without causing obvious surface damage. After measuring, photographing, and mapping the scene, Cole entered a critical line in the scene. #1 report, brake pattern irregular. Lateral force applied, evidence indicates deliberate forced stop maneuver. This was the first time in case file, CR0611472, that the term forced stop appeared, marking the shift from assuming an ordinary missing persons case to the possibility of active human intervention in the bus's journey. Recognizing the importance of this discovery, the investigation team immediately shifted focus to the only adult on the bus besides the students, the driver. He was located at his home at dawn the next day and invited to the command post set up at the school office for a formal forensic interview, fully recorded and conducted away from anyone who might influence his statement. From the moment he entered the room, his demeanor drew the deputy's attention, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding contact, hands clasped tightly, repeatedly glancing at the door as if worried someone else might overhear the conversation. When asked to recount the journey that evening, he responded hesitantly, starting and stopping, but one detail stood out immediately. When the deputy asked about leaving Apache Junction, he mentioned flashing red and blue lights behind him. Light of that type did not resemble traffic signals or civilian vehicle lights, but was closer to semi-professional warning lights, the kind often mounted on patrol vehicles or private security cars. He described that as he drove away from the station area, something shone into the rearview mirror, bright and glaring, making my eyes squint a bit. But when the deputy asked if they were flashing lights, he only replied, "I'm not sure. I didn't want to look long." The vague answer prompted the interviewer to switch to open-ended questions, asking him to describe any sounds heard shortly after. This time he was clearer. Someone had shouted short and sharp, like the command to stop the bus or pull over, but he insisted he was not 100% sure, repeating the same phrasing, as if carefully weighing each word to avoid error. The coordinating deputy noted in the record that his voice trembled slightly when discussing this part, unlike when talking about other portions of the trip. When asked why he stopped the vehicle if he wasn't certain it was a police request, he lowered his head, paused for several seconds, then said, "I just did what? I thought they wanted me to stop," but provided no further details about who gave the order, the direction of the sound, or the distance between his vehicle and those behind. Subsequent microanalysis of the recording, conducted by the county technician, clearly showed signs of stress in his voice. Sudden increase in vocal tremor when mentioning the red and blue lights, interrupted breathing in sentences related to a command. Slower speech rate when describing steering to the right. The anomaly was that throughout the entire interview, lasting nearly 40 minutes, he avoided mentioning anyone approaching the vehicle and provided no detailed description of any vehicles behind, despite the gas station witnesses confirming the presence of two dark SUVs. When the deputy asked directly whether he had seen any vehicles tailing, he replied, "I was just looking at the road ahead. I didn't dare look in the mirror then." A statement suggesting fear more than lack of observation. The persistent evasion led the interviewer to conclude that the driver was concealing something, not necessarily about himself, but possibly about what happened and the people he feared being connected to it. When the interview ended, Cole ordered the full recording replayed immediately at the command post. The hesitations, evasive answers, and especially the changes in tone whenever the driver mentioned the red and blue lights, and the command echoing through the window, led Cole to enter into the investigation log that the statement shows significant signs of stress and avoidance. This assessment, aligned with the evidence at scene #1, strengthening the likelihood that the driver stopped not due to mechanical issues or voluntary route change, but under orders or pressure from a tailing vehicle behind. It was the alignment between the statement and the scene that prompted Cole to immediately direct the next step, expanding the survey along the entire Peralta Road axis, the route indicated by both the SUV tire tracks and the K9 scent direction. This was a narrow, rocky dirt road, lacking lighting, running deep into semi-desert terrain, ideal for forcing a large vehicle off course without detection by civilians. The forensic team was assigned to conduct the survey near 3 a.m., equipped with portable floodlights, measuring tools, an older Canon digital camera, and standard evidence collection kits. While approaching a section about 600 meters from scene #1, where the surface shifted from compacted dirt to mixed gravel, the survey team discovered a cluster of unusual objects scattered over an area of approximately 8 square meters. This was immediately marked as scene #2. The first piece of evidence recorded was a 6.3 centimeters black plastic fragment, less than 3 mm thick, with a curved edge and jagged tear. This plastic resembled material used for underbody shielding or fender liners on SUVs or light trucks. Based on the curvature and composition, the forensic deputy determined it did not match school bus parts, which typically use thicker, stiffer yellow plastic. A second, smaller plastic piece, about 2 centimeters and irregularly triangular, showed scrape marks, as if pressed against metal, suggesting it broke off during contact between vehicles or when an SUV brushed into bushes containing small rocks. The second evidence item was a nearly 40 centimeters oil streak on the ground, about 1 step away from the plastic pieces. The forensic team used a quick test swab and noted it was not oil leaking from the bus, as bus oil has different viscosity and color. The scene oil was thinner, with a faint smell of hydraulic fluid or power steering fluid, common in SUVs or pickups when the underside suffers heavy impact. The third evidence item was a small, 1.5 centimeters, gray-black rubber piece flattened into the ground. Under strong light, a zigzag tread pattern characteristic of off-road SUV rear tires was visible, not matching bus tire treads. The fourth evidence item was 3 light gray plastic fibers caught on a low bush beside the road, each 4-5 centimeters long and thin like tie-down straps. These fibers could belong to straps securing auxiliary equipment on a vehicle, but without lab analysis, the forensic team could only record shape, material, and position. The fifth evidence item was a small dark blue fabric scrap just over 1 centimeter wide, stuck under a roadside rock. No one could determine what clothing it came from. It could be seat liner from an SUV or from clothing worn by someone tailing the bus. The fabric was collected with tweezers and placed in numbered nylon bag 5, but no deeper evaluation was made at the time. Once all evidence was collected in proper sequence, the final step was to transfer it to temporary cold storage and report to Sheriff Cole for lab submission. However, instead of ordering the forensic team to seal everything and send it immediately for testing, Cole issued a directive that stunned many deputies. He ordered all scene #2 evidence placed in the cold storage box in the small shed behind the school to hold temporarily until he reviewed it again. This was a portable cold unit the command post had set up in the school storage room for short-term preservation of perishable items, completely unlike the standard evidence room with coded locks, surveillance cameras, or double seals. By regulation, all evidence was required to go directly to the PCSO evidence room, but Cole's order completely bypassed that procedure. Deputy Aaron Phillips, who was increasingly noticing irregularities throughout the case, noted immediately in his personal notebook evidence stored improperly by direct order. No lab request, possible suppression. He also quietly photographed the evidence positions before bagging, in case they were later altered or lost. What particularly troubled Phillips was that Cole provided no reason for not sending the evidence for analysis, a critical step to confirm collision, drag marks, or SUV tire evidence beyond the bus itself. Cole only said, "We don't yet know how relevant these items are. Keep them here for now." That phrasing, combined with Cole's failure to create a proper chain of custody transfer form, and instead having an assistant jot a few cursory lines, turned scene #2 into one of the first scenes showing signs of irregular interference in the investigation process. All the evidence, 5 types totaling more than 10 small samples, was placed in the cold storage box with only a single thin seal, completely violating county evidence management standards. Phillips left scene #2 with a heavy feeling items that could be vital clues were being treated like temporary trash, and this no longer resembled a standard investigation. When the survey at scene #2 clearly showed signs of a vehicle following, but still found no trace whatsoever of the bus, Sheriff Cole ordered the expansion of the search into the more rugged terrain northeast of Peralta Road, the Siphon Draw Basin area, where the dirt road gradually disappeared and gave way to rough rocky terrain, deep crevices, and the sparse clusters of trees characteristic of the foothills of the Superstition Mountains. SAR was forced to deploy Search Block C, the most difficult phase in the entire ICS-based search system, because the terrain here did not allow the use of ATVs or pickup trucks. The team could only proceed on foot, carrying headlamps, probing rods, first aid kits, and 2006 handheld GPS units that lacked accuracy. The trail leading into the basin steepened gradually, the ground shifting from compacted dirt to slippery, easily crumbling basalt rock layers, flanked by dry creosote bushes with sharp branches that could easily tear clothing, and farther in were crevices formed by natural erosion. One deputy described the area in his report. "If you want to hide anything from prying eyes, this is the perfect place." The constantly changing slope made tire tracks very difficult to retain their shape, but K9 units were still brought into the area to sniff for any lingering human scents or exhaust residues from vehicles. As the SR team advanced nearly 800 meters deeper into the basin, flashlight beams illuminated an unusual patch of ground, darker in color than the surroundings, mixed among small rocks, and appearing as if it had been burned. One deputy bent down, used a metal rod to part the thin layer of soil on top, and discovered that the underlying material was gray-black, fine powdery in texture, mixed with small white-gray fragments that at first glance looked like broken rock. When gathering a small handful for examination under the light, the forensic team realized this was not natural soil. It was ash from burning. The ash was black, turning gray, with a slightly fine but uneven texture, some portions clumped into small lumps, like unburned charcoal residue, characteristics commonly seen in high-temperature burns that were not controlled with specialized equipment. Intermixed in the ash layer were tiny white grains with rough surfaces, easily crumbling when pressed firmly with a gloved finger. They measured 1.3 mm and were opaque in color, reminiscent of organic material that had been burned but could not be identified by the naked eye. When one deputy used a metal probe to push the ash layer aside, he noticed the underlying soil had darker staining, as if it had been exposed to very high heat. The burned ash area extended over a radius of more than 1.2 meters, not large like a forest fire, but also not small enough to be just an ordinary campfire. Notably, the surrounding area showed absolutely no signs of camping activity, no ring of stones for a fire pit, no long wood charcoal remnants, no cans or trash. There were also no signs of repeated foot traffic, which was strange for a place that hikers occasionally passed through. Upon closer examination of the ash, the deputy discovered a fragment about 4 mm long, ivory white in color, with slightly curved edges, lacking clear structure, but completely different from ordinary rock fragments. The experienced member of the forensic team, though unable to confirm, still noted in his notebook that there is a possibility this is not mineral material. In any missing persons investigation, especially when burned ash is found in a remote area, standard procedure requires immediately collecting samples and sending them to a lab for chemical and organic composition analysis. But Sheriff Cole, when reported to via radio about this discovery, responded curtly. "Mark the location, collect a small sample for the record, but no need to send it for testing at this time." That decision left many deputies puzzled, because burned ash in a sparse wooded area, with no signs of camping, appearing right along the trajectory sniffed out by the K9, was sufficient to be considered significant evidence. However, Cole still ordered the samples collected in a collect and hold manner, meaning only collect preliminarily seal, without requiring analysis. The forensic team collected 3 ash samples, one from the center of the burn area, one from the northern edge where the ash was thinner, and one mixed sample, including ash and small white fragments. All were placed in paper bags, correct procedure for samples needing to breathe moisture. But upon returning to the command post, they were not transferred to the evidence room, but instead placed together in a cold storage box, like the evidence collected from scene #2. Phillips, who closely followed every step of the investigation, noted in his personal notebook, ash samples possibly related to high temperature, not sent to lab. Highly unusual. That note, written by him in the darkness of the school storage room, was the first evidence showing that the decision to forego analysis of the ash, which could have clarified the relevance of the siphon draw basin area, was a critical error in the entire initial investigation phase. In the official report, Cole only wrote one line: collected unidentified burnt residue, relevance undetermined. That cold line completely failed to reflect the actual seriousness of the discovery in the basin, a clear indication that high-temperature burning activity had occurred there, at a time close to the night the group of students disappeared. But instead of becoming the focus of the investigative effort, those ash samples were pushed into a dark corner of temporary storage, waiting silently until someone with enough courage or authority asked the question that should have been asked from the beginning. The second interview with the driver took place just a few hours after the SAR team returned from Siphon Draw Basin with the report of the burned ash, but without any directive from Sheriff Cole to analyze it. The atmosphere in the command post was now noticeably more tense. Many deputies began to doubt Cole's handling of evidence, and for that reason the second interview with the driver was conducted under closer observation by the forensic team. When the driver entered the room, his demeanor was completely different from the first interview. If previously he had been trembling, avoiding eye contact with everyone, and showing clear fear when mentioning the lights and the commanding voice, this time he crossed his arms over his chest, eyes looking down, and answered more cautiously, as if he had prepared in advance what he wanted to say. When the deputy repeated the question about why he suddenly stopped the bus, he paused for a few seconds, then dropped a statement that surprised everyone in the room. "I think, maybe the students had already left the bus." This answer was completely contrary to his previous statement, where he had insisted he was forced to stop, due to a shout he believed came from an authority figure. The deputy immediately took notes and asked him to explain clearly, but the driver continued to repeat, "Maybe the kids got off earlier," without providing any details about the timing, circumstances, or reason. When asked why he had not mentioned this possibility at all in the first interview, he slowly replied, "I don't remember clearly. Now thinking back, I'm not sure they were still on the bus at that point." This change prompted the interviewer to shift to analyzing demeanor, using the micro-expression recording method commonly applied in forensic interviews. Each time he mentioned the detail of the students leaving the bus, his voice showed micro-tremor, a slight quiver at the end of the sentence, indicating psychological instability or an effort to conceal. Additionally, whenever asked about specific timing, he consistently looked to the left instead of down as before, a common sign of trying to construct an acceptable response rather than recalling the truth. Subsequent audio analysis showed his speech rate also changed. Sentences related to the red and blue lights and the commanding voice were almost rushed through quickly and in a low voice, while sentences about the students leaving the bus were spoken unusually slowly, as if he were weighing each word. When the deputy directly confronted him with the two conflicting statements and demanded an explanation for the inconsistency, the driver gave evasive answers like "it all happened very fast," "I was panicking," or "I might have remembered wrong." However, These defensive responses had not appeared in the first interview, where he had been strongly emotionally triggered when mentioning the lights and the shout. A veteran deputy on the team immediately recognized this was not the behavior of a memory disturbed by trauma, but rather resembled the behavior of someone who had just been influenced from the outside. Someone may have spoken to him after the first interview. When the questioning shifted to whether anyone had met or contacted him between the two interviews, he completely dodged it, repeating "I just stayed home" 3 times in a row. His manner of answering caused Phillips, who was present in the room, to glance at Cole for a reaction. But Cole remained silent, arms crossed, standing close to the wall. The tension in the room escalated when the deputy asked one final time, "Were you asked by anyone to change your statement?" The driver immediately bowed his head, was silent for nearly 10 seconds, then answered dryly, "No." Subsequent micro-expression analysis showed this was the least credible answer in the entire interview. After the driver left, the deputies in the room began quietly debating the reliability of the statement. One group believed he was hiding something and may have been influenced externally. Another group wanted to conduct a third interview with him that very night. But when their eyes turned to Cole waiting for a decision, Cole simply said the second statement was sufficient to consider other possibilities, then ordered the interview session closed. That moment marked the first division within PCSO. One side believing interference was occurring, and the other, led by Cole, believing the unusual signs did not need further digging. Phillips noted in his notebook, "Second statement completely inconsistent, serious inconsistency. Driver fearful, but not afraid of us." Immediately after the driver's highly inconsistent second interview, when many deputies began to suspect someone had influenced him to alter his statement, another unusual technical detail emerged from PCSO's internal IT department. The GPS data from the 2 patrol vehicles operating on the night the group of students disappeared was no longer in the central storage system. Checking GPS data was not part of the standard search procedure, but a night shift technician explained that PCSO's 2006 GPS system recorded all patrol vehicle position data to the internal server at 30-second intervals. This data was rarely reviewed unless there was a request to trace a vehicle's route in a special incident. But because the disappearance involved the possibility of the bus being forced off course by another vehicle, the technician decided to check whether the 2 patrol units 2L19 and 2L22, the first vehicles to arrive at the school after the 911 call, had any unusual routes that evening. However, when opening the GPS log for the time frame from 8:50 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., he discovered a complete gap, with no data whatsoever. Strangely, from 7 p.m. to 8:49 p.m., and from 11:31 p.m. onward, both vehicles had full data. This was almost impossible to occur naturally, because the system recorded data even when vehicles were stationary, and the internal server had no scheduled automatic deletion by time. The technician immediately reran the query using file recovery tools, but only received no recoverable data, indicating the files for that time period had not been corrupted, but had been overwritten or manually deleted. When asked whether a power outage or system error could cause this, he firmly said no, because the internal server in the tech room had a UPS backup and the voltage log for that night was completely normal. He immediately reported the discovery to Deputy Phillips, who was then reviewing the driver's notes, because Phillips was the only one in the group openly suspicious of the ongoing irregularities in the investigation. When Phillips reviewed the log, he immediately recognized the serious coincidence. The GPS data gap for the 2 patrol vehicles aligned almost exactly with the dead zone window in the bus timeline. If the patrol vehicle's GPS was deleted precisely during the hours the bus disappeared, it meant someone did not want the positions of those patrol vehicles revealed during the most sensitive time. Phillips asked the technician to print the entire log and run volatile data analysis, but PCSO's old system lacked deep recovery capabilities. Afterward, the technician checked who had access to the internal server. Only 4 people, 2 IT administrators, the chief deputy, and Sheriff Daniel Cole. This made Phillips even more uneasy. He directly asked the technician whether manual deletion was the only possibility. The technician confirmed the data did not disappear naturally, was not a recording error, but required logging into the internal server and deleting by specific time range. Those capable of doing this all had administrator accounts or high command level. Phillips immediately noted in his notebook, GPS logs missing during key timeline. Manual deletion nearly certain. He also immediately informed another veteran deputy, who reacted by requesting the report be escalated to Cole for expanded investigation. However, when the information reached Cole in an internal meeting near 4 a.m., Cole's reaction silenced the room. He looked at the printout for less than 10 seconds, then set it down, saying 2006 GPS is notoriously glitchy, don't waste time on something unimportant. One deputy tried to explain that two other vehicles on the same shift, unrelated to the disappearance, had full data during the same time frame, proving the system had no malfunction, but Cole interrupted, saying there is no reason to suspect internal foul play, and ordered the GPS check closed to focus on field searches. His dismissal of such critical data caused PCSO internals to split into two camps, Cole's camp believing the data deletion was unrelated to the case, and Phillips' camp believing it was evidence of intentional interference. A young deputy whispered to Phillips as everyone left the room, "Nobody accidentally deletes exactly that time window. This isn't coincidence." But when Phillips proposed opening an internal investigation into the deletion operation, Cole completely rejected it, emphasizing we don't need to create more trouble. The decision not to expand the GPS investigation, despite sufficient grounds to view it as serious irregularity, became a quiet turning point that led doubting deputies to suspect the disappearance was not just a complex case, but might involve matters they were not permitted to touch. Right after the deleted GPS data issue was hastily and inadequately dismissed by Cole, Deputy Phillips could no longer shake the feeling that something within PCSO's internal machinery was no longer operating properly. He returned to the watchroom to review all documents related to the September 19th night shift, particularly the patrol log, a large manual ledger stored at the station per regulation, recording the position, route, and activity of each patrol unit per shift. This type of document was usually overlooked, but in complex cases it could become key evidence to determine where a patrol vehicle had been, with whom, and whether it had participated in any unusual events. Phillips sat alone in the watchroom under tired yellow lighting, opened the log to the entry for the evening shift of 9/19. When turning to the page recording the patrol route of Unit 3L07, the unit assigned to patrol the area near the intersection of Peralta Road and Highway 88, Phillips stopped immediately. The handwriting was not like what he had seen before. The deputy responsible for that shift normally had sharp handwriting, slightly right-slanted, and often underlined items needing attention. But this page, the page recording the exact patrol route relevant to the area where the bus may have been forced off course, had thicker, unnaturally even strokes, lacking the personal characteristics of the actual writer. Most suspicious was the way times were written. The on-duty deputy always wrote 21:15, 22:40 in a natural slanted style, but on this page the numbers were written upright, abnormally uniform, as if someone had deliberately copied from an unfamiliar handwriting sample. Phillips immediately pulled logs from previous days and compared them visually. In the first comparison alone, he found 9 clear differences: stroke thickness, spacing between letters, slant angle, shape of the letter G, the way the number 7 had a crossbar, changes in how T was written. Writing speed evident from stroke tremor, line spacing, and punctuation marks. These were not minor differences like too tired so writing changed, but systematic differences resembling the handwriting of an entirely different person. Phillips continued comparing the signature at the bottom of the page. The on-duty deputy always signed with a long trailing flourish, but on this suspicious page, the signature was shortened, the tail stubby, and showed signs of deliberately imitating the shape. He immediately photographed the page and 3 others for comparison using his phone. When zooming in, he noticed places where the pen pressure was heavier, indicating the writer was trying to create habits they did not actually possess. What alarmed him even more was the content of the page. Unit 3L07's patrol route was recorded in an exceedingly perfect manner, as if adhering exactly to schedule without a single-minute deviation. But Phillips knew well, any patrolling deputy always left small details: a call, a vehicle stop check, a minor route change. The discovered log page had none of that. It was clean to an unnatural degree, as if someone wanted to create a trouble-free, unchanging route, a route so perfect it could not possibly be real. Phillips brought the suspicious log page to the temporary meeting room, where a few deputies were still reviewing mountain area maps. He did not openly accuse anyone, just asked one on-duty deputy if he noticed anything strange in the handwriting. That deputy glanced for a few seconds, then said immediately, "This isn't the handwriting of the person on duty that night." Word spread quickly in the group. Within minutes, another deputy came to look and reached the same conclusion. These people had worked together for years, were familiar with each other's handwriting, and could spot differences instantly. Phillips proposed drafting an irregularity report and requesting forensic handwriting analysis, a straightforward process sufficient to confirm the log page had been replaced or altered. But when he presented the document to Cole, the reaction was completely unlike what he expected. Cole looked at the log page for less than 3 seconds, then set it down, saying simply, "You're overcomplicating the issue. It's just handwriting change due to fatigue." Phillips explained that 9 irregularities could not be due to fatigue. Cole interrupted, voice sharper. "No internal debate. The patrol log is not the focus right now." When Phillips continued proposing to send the page to a handwriting expert in the county, Cole showed clear irritation and ordered an immediate stop to digging internally, emphasizing any check required his approval. Every deputy in the room clearly felt the escalating tension. This was no longer a professional disagreement, but had become a direct confrontation. A young deputy glanced at Phillips with worry, as if signaling him to stop, while several others stood silent, saying nothing but their eyes revealing growing doubt about how Cole was controlling the investigation's direction. Finally, Cole cut everyone off with a short, cold, and decisive order. "Close this topic. No one is to open an internal investigation." The room immediately fell into a heavy atmosphere, as if the air had been compressed. Everyone understood that the suspicions surrounding the deleted GPS data, evidence not sent for analysis, and now the altered watch log page had touched a boundary Cole absolutely would not allow crossing. As he left the room, Phillips opened his personal notebook and quickly wrote a few lines, handwriting more hurried and sharply cold than ever. "Log page altered. Handwriting mismatch. Cole blocks check. Internal cracks beginning." Less than an hour later, as the first light of the desert filtered through the frosted glass of the temporary meeting room in the school office, Cole called an urgent internal meeting. The entire investigation team was exhausted after nearly 10 hours of continuous searching, interviewing, and processing evidence, making the atmosphere in the room so tense that even the slightest clink of metal was enough to make someone flinch. Cole entered with a thick file folder tucked under his arm, walking straight to the head of the conference table, without looking at anyone, as if all the anomalies that had just been raised, from the missing GPS data, the altered logbook, to the driver's contradictory statements, had not diverted him from the path he was determined to impose on the case. Right behind him was an administrative staff member from the mayor's office, an appearance that prompted many deputies to exchange cautious glances, since normally the town government did not attend mid-investigation operational meetings in an unresolved missing persons case. Cole opened the file folder, flipped to the page he had prepared, and began presenting a summary that was completely different from what the deputies had witnessed throughout the night. He stated that there was no evidence the bus had been followed, even though footage from the gas station and witness statements clearly showed 2 dark-colored SUVs appearing behind it. He said there were no signs of forcing the vehicle off the road, despite scene #1 showing curved skid marks, lateral pull forces, and clear scrape marks, indicating external impact. He glossed over the fact that the GPS on 2 patrol vehicles had been erased exactly at the time of the disappearance, merely saying briefly that equipment malfunctions are common. Regarding the burned ashes found in Siphon Draw Basin, he described them as remains of an old hiker's campfire, even though there was no stone ring, charred wood, or any signs of camping. Finally, he emphasized that there was no concrete evidence of criminal activity, arguing that the disappearance could be related to the group of students voluntarily leaving the vehicle, a hypothesis that just hours earlier, Cole himself had deemed unreasonable. What caused the room to fall into a chilling silence was when he declared firmly, "No foul play indicated, no signs of criminal activity." The conclusion seemed premeditated, not reflecting the nature of what the investigation team had uncovered, but rather a desire to close the case as quickly as possible. When the mayor's administrative staff member Barker stepped forward, he was holding a pre-drafted document for the mayor to approve. The document contained an order requiring PCSO to suspend all SAR operations on public and private land within the Copper Canyon area until a new assessment was conducted. The stated reason was no reasonable basis to continue deploying resources on a large scale. This was the first time in the careers of many deputies that they had seen SAR operations halted without any conclusion regarding the victim's location or safety status. One deputy stood up abruptly to object, saying that the evidence at scene #1 and the burn pit in the basin were sufficient to expand the search, but Cole only responded coldly, "The decision has been made." Cole went on to announce a gag order prohibiting all deputies from communicating with the press, sharing evidence, photos, or interview contents with any federal agency without a document signed by him. This order, in essence, sealed the entire case within PCSO internally, preventing assistance from DPS or the FBI, agencies with greater expertise in large-scale missing persons investigation. No one in the room said another word, but the silence was no different from a stifled protest. At the end of the meeting, Cole announced that the file would be transferred to pending inactive status, suspended due to lack of criminal indicators, even though most deputies understood that such a file would effectively be considered closed in practice, with no dedicated team continuing to follow it. The simmering disagreement in the room erupted as Cole left with the mayor's staff member. An older deputy whispered just loud enough for the two people next to him to hear, "We just got forced to turn off the lights the moment we saw a shadow." Phillips did not react immediately. He stood staring at the documents on the table, where the replaced logbook page and the blank GPS data printout lay side by side, like two perfect pieces of a picture that no one was allowed to see in full. When Cole returned to the command post a few minutes later to collect the files, his eyes glanced over Phillips, but did not linger. The door closed behind him, leaving in the room a heavy silence that no one knew how to break. Phillips walked over to the equipment cabinet, pulled out the small black notebook he always carried on duty, but had never used to record anything beyond routine tasks. For the first time in his career, he opened the notebook to write down things he knew would vanish without a trace, if not preserved, right then. GPS erased during the exact disappearance window. Ash and plastic fragment evidence not sent to the lab. Logbook page replaced driver's statements, changing direction. Unusually, SAR halted against protocol, information sharing ban, and the no foul play declaration issued without real analysis. He wrote each line carefully, knowing that what he was doing could get him in trouble later. But if he didn't do it, the entire truth would be buried along with the disappearance. And so, on the very morning that the official investigation was suffocated from within, Phillips' first personal journal was born. A small but steadfast piece of evidence against the silence that Cole had just imposed on the entire PCSO. When the order to halt all SAR operations was issued and the file was transferred to pending inactive status, the disappearance of the 18 Clearwater Ridge students was not officially closed, but no personnel were allowed to continue investigating. Within a few weeks, all evidence collected from scene #1, scene #2, and Siphon Draw Basin was removed from the temporary command post and transferred to the evidence storage warehouse of the Pinal County Sheriff's Office. an old brick building about 2 blocks from the main headquarters, designed for long-term storage of criminal evidence, but never fully equipped for cases requiring preservation of biological samples or degradable materials. The evidence warehouse had 3 small cold rooms, each maintained only by simple air conditioning systems without specialized temperature settings for different types of samples. According to standards, ash samples, soil samples, and organic materials must be stored at stable temperatures, protected from moisture and disturbance. But when the deputies in charge of storage placed the bags containing the ash samples from Siphon Draw Basin and the plastic, oil, and fabric samples from Scene #2 into the system, they simply put everything into one large white plastic box, labeled CR061472, hold, then placed the box on the 3rd shelf of cold room number 2. There was no separation between types of evidence, no classification of degradable materials, and no notes about requiring specific temperature levels. The temporary cold storage box that Cole had requested on the first night was not transferred intact, but was opened to consolidate the evidence, causing the loss of the original environmental context for each sample. The temperature in the cold room fluctuated from 45 to 60 degrees F, completely unsuitable for preserving ash or fragments potentially containing organic components. One logistics deputy had noted in a report that the humidity in cold room number 2 was high enough for thin frost to form on the box walls in the mornings, a sign that the evidence would degrade in just a few months. However, because the file had been labeled by Cole as no foul play indicated, no one in the evidence storage unit was authorized to prioritize processing or send items for analysis. They simply followed instructions store until requested. But that request never came. According to PCSO regulations, any unresolved missing persons case classified as inactive must have a dedicated detective review the file every 6 months to assess for new leads. But in 2006, PCSO had no cold case unit and only 3 detectives handling all active cases. No one was assigned to monitor file CR061472, and because Cole's final report concluded no criminal indicators, the file was placed in the low-priority missing persons category, a category that almost no one touched unless requested by victims' families. Such requests did come. Parents of the Clearwater Ridge students continuously called for months after the case was suspended, hoping for more information or to request expanded searches. But because Cole had imposed the information dissemination ban, every response from PCSO was the same. The investigation is still under review. No new updates. Meanwhile, the evidence in storage began to degrade. The black plastic fragments from Scene #2 warped slightly due to the humid environment. The green fabric pieces faded and softened, and the 3 ash samples in paper bags absorbed moisture to the point that when a storage employee accidentally checked in 2007, the ash had clumped into small masses, completely losing its original characteristics. Any organic traces, if present, such as partially burned cells or microstructural materials, were irreversibly destroyed. An internal report noting this degradation was sent up to command and met with silence. The lack of a dedicated detective caused related documents to become scattered as well. Some interview reports, including the first forensic interview recording of the driver, were not merged into the main file, but left in a separate folder kept by the night shift deputy. The GPS analysis of the data gap in the 2 patrol vehicles was stuffed at the end of another file folder and not sequentially numbered per regulations. The patrol logbook with the replaced page, potential evidence of internal tampering, was lumped in with administrative documents and stored in the shift's general file drawer without a seal. Over time, the legal value of these documents diminished not only due to improper storage standards, but because the chain of custody was broken from multiple directions, no individual tracking codes for each sample, no notes on the last person handling the evidence, and no valid transfer signatures from the command post to storage. Some initial data was even lost when the warehouse switched cataloging systems in 2009. All these errors caused case CR061472 to gradually sink under layers of paperwork dust. For PCSO at that time, this case was no longer viewed as an ongoing investigation, but as a faded file among hundreds of unsolved ones, with no one having the motivation or authority to reopen it. Meanwhile, Deputy Phillips, who had witnessed every deviation in the first 10 hours of the case, continued keeping his personal journal, stored separately in his home safe. He knew that the official file could be altered, but his notebook recording every detail about the erased GPS, the replaced shift log, the neglected evidence, was the only part of the truth that remained intact in a system. Gradually forgetting the disappearance of 18 children, as if it had never happened. In 2014, 8 years after file CR0-61472 was pushed into oblivion in PCSO's outdated evidence warehouse, an unexpected event occurred from completely unrelated circumstances. During a multi-county anti-drug operation, Arizona DPS forces coordinating with the DEA arrested a transport group belonging to the Sunset Syndicate, a mid-sized criminal organization operating mainly in southern Arizona, specializing in trafficking weapons, people, and drugs through remote desert routes. Among those arrested was a longtime member named Ricardo Rico Velasquez, known for being reckless but also recognized as a courier, specializing in transporting live cargo, a role that drew particular federal attention. During interrogation at the Mesa Temporary Detention Center, when pressed about a failed human smuggling transport from a few years earlier, Rico suddenly shifted the conversation and said he had been involved in a really big job in Copper Canyon. When the investigator asked for specifics, Rico leaned back in his chair, sighed as if weighing how much to say, then dropped a statement that made the two investigators present look at each other in shock. "I once took 18 kids from 2 patrol cars right there in Copper Canyon, a long time ago, probably back in '06. The investigator immediately requested full recording and asked Rico to explain in detail. He described a September night, nearly moonless dark, when 2 patrol vehicles stopped at a rendezvous point near the desert area at the foot of the mountains. According to Rico, there was a school bus that the cops didn't want to drive anymore, and he and 3 other syndicate members were called in to take over a shipment. The children transferred to them via the 2 patrol cars. When asked for more details, Rico could not provide specific descriptions of the officers' appearances, but he described white patrol cars with green stripes, the type used by PCSO in 2006. The transcript of the statement ran to 5 pages, including descriptions of the location, time, vehicles, and number of children. Notably, Rico emphasized 2 points. First, the children were transferred to our vehicles from the police cars, not from the bus, and second, we didn't touch them there, just followed instructions and took them away. When the investigator asked took them where, Rico was silent for a long time before saying, "Don't remember, dirt roads, woods, dust everywhere, no lights there." These descriptions perfectly matched the terrain of Peralta Road and the Siphon Draw Basin area, places the SAR team had searched in 2006. When asked why he was revealing this now, Rico simply replied, "That job kept me up at night for years. I don't know if those kids lived or died. Now that I'm caught, what's the point of keeping it in?" The statement was typed up, filed, and transferred through the cooperation channel between DPS and PCSO per protocol, and at PCSO, in the hands of the person responsible for reviewing and deciding whether to reopen file CR0611472. That statement stopped and sank to the bottom of a desk drawer. According to internal transfer records, the document was sent to the PCSO staff office along with a preliminary recommendation from DPS. This statement matches several elements of the 2006 Clearwater Ridge disappearance. Recommend considering reopening the investigation. However, just 3 days later, the recommendation was stamped insufficient credibility. No further action. No PCSO detective was assigned to review the content. No internal meeting was called to discuss the new lead. No one called Rico for further questions about the bus, the 2 patrol cars, or the stop location. In fact, according to the receipt log, the file was not forwarded to any higher criminal unit in the county, but pushed directly into miscellaneous leads. a folder notorious as a place where sensitive documents were buried. This dismissal could not be seen as ordinary oversight. The 2014 lead not only matched the time and location of the disappearance, but contained details that only someone involved would know, especially mentioning 2 patrol cars and 18 children, numbers perfectly matching the Clearwater Ridge case. Any experienced detective would understand that such a statement should immediately trigger a reinvestigation, especially coming from a syndicate member, a group known to operate right in the Peralta Road border area during those years. But the dismissal not only kept CR 061,472 from being reopened, it also left the already degraded evidence lying untouched in storage for many more years. And more seriously, it reinforced the growing feeling within PCSO, especially among those like Phillips, though no longer officially involved, that the Clearwater Ridge case was not just forgotten over time, but had been actively pushed into silence from the very beginning by someone with authority. In 2020, as Arizona conducted a review of backlog missing persons cases to support a statewide criminal records reform program, the Clearwater Ridge case, despite lying dormant in the inactive category for 14 years, was unexpectedly placed on the reassessment list due to its multiple victims, nature, and the fact that the original file contained unanalyzed scientific evidence. The assembled expert team consisted of 3 forensic analysts from DPS, a former federal investigator, and 2 experts in investigative procedural misconduct. Their task was to examine the entire file, from the disappearance night reports to the remaining evidence in PCSO storage. As soon as they opened the official file, they noticed an anomaly. Sheriff Cole's final report was only 8 pages long, far too short for a mass disappearance, lacking a timeline reconstruction, scene appendices, search maps, and any damage analysis or statement conflict sections. Evidence was listed superficially, without individual identifiers, and completely missing chain of custody descriptions. The experts went through each item and began classifying errors by severity based on 2006 Arizona procedural standards and current improved standards. The first errors were technical: failure to send burned ash samples for testing, no tire track or skid mark analysis at scene #1, no testing of oil and plastic fragments at scene #2, no soil sampling at the burn site to determine burn temperature. Next were procedural errors: no expanded SARA planning after discovering suspicious traces, halting search without verifying vehicle route, no reporting evidence to DPS or FBI, despite the case scale exceeding PCSO capacity. More serious errors emerged when they reviewed the GPS records. Data from the 2 patrol vehicles missing exactly during the dead zone window. This was classified as tampering risk high level. Next, they examined the shift log page with altered handwriting. Photos taken by Phillips in 2006 had been attached to the file from an unclear source. The handwriting expert determined at least 2 different writers between consecutive pages. This was ranked as forensic inconsistency, potential intentional alteration. When reviewing the driver's statement reports, the experts noted unusual changes between the first and second interviews, which should have triggered a third forensic interview with independent oversight. This too was ranked as critical missed procedure. But what shocked the evaluation team most was the evidence notes section. The green fabric had faded. The plastic had lost shape. The ash had clumped. No samples remained viable for DNA or microbial analysis. When reviewing evidence transport records, they discovered the cold storage box was not sealed properly and placed in a storage room with high temperature fluctuations, a violation classified at the maximum level, evidence integrity compromised beyond recovery. Finally, the expert team compiled a summary table listing 13 key violations directly impacting case resolution. 1. Failure to test biological evidence. 2. No skid mark scene analysis. 3. No detailed scene #1 report. 4. No oil leak testing. 5. Failure to clarify driver statements. 6. No internal investigation when GPS data vanished. 7. Unexamined replaced log page. 8. Insufficient basin search expansion. 9. No transfer to standard storage. 10. No full timeline model. 11. No federal unit reporting. 12. No maintained chain of custody. 13. No 2014 RICO lead evaluation. The table was attached to the official recommendation, recommend reopening CR 061,472 as a potential foul play case. Substantial procedural errors compromised original findings. However, because the decision to reopen the file required PCSO approval, and because Sheriff Cole still held a high position in early 2020, the recommendation was held back without approval. A cold note was added to the file, deferred, insufficient basis for action at this time. Despite the experts' efforts, the Clearwater Ridge case remained dormant in storage, awaiting a significant enough event to pull it back into the light. In August 2021, a dry lightning storm swept across the foothills of the Superstition Mountains, igniting a small wildfire in the area northeast of Peralta Road, the very region that SAR had searched 15 years earlier. The fire initially spread only through dry grass and creosote bushes, but unusually strong desert winds caused it to expand rapidly, forcing the Arizona Forest Fire Force to deploy a full response team. They used fire breaks, water tanker lines, and 2 firefighting helicopters to contain the blaze before it could advance deep into Siphon Draw Basin, where the rugged terrain could have prolonged firefighting efforts for weeks. When the fire was extinguished the following morning, a fire crew was assigned to mop up the burned area to confirm no hot spots remained. While sweeping along a strip of completely scorched ground, a young firefighter named McCaffrey spotted an unusual object amid the ash and charred soil. At first, he thought it was a piece of melted plastic from an abandoned ATV, but when he carefully flipped it over with a metal probe, the ash fell away to reveal a faded yellow school bus seat fragment, with burned and curled metal edges and interior foam that had turned to charcoal. That yellow color was unmistakable. School buses in the region from 2000-2007 all used a distinctive yellow vinyl seat covering, something no other commercial vehicle employed. McCaffrey immediately called his crew chief over to examine it. The fire crew recognized that the object did not belong to any modern equipment and decided to report it to the county office in accordance with protocol for unusual evidence in burn areas. The Pinal County Sheriff's Office dispatched an officer to the scene to collect the evidence, and as soon as the seat fragment was brought back to PCSO headquarters, a storage technician, who was also aware of the Clearwater Ridge case, though it had long been considered a dead file, immediately recognized the seat color. He retrieved the embossed serial number on the back of the metal frame, a sequence partially readable despite the charring, and cross-referenced it with internal Clearwater Ridge bus maintenance records from 2003 to 2006. The result stunned everyone. The number matched the type of seat installed on one of the 3 buses used by Clearwater Ridge, and more importantly, it belonged to the serial line of bus designated CRB-12, the very vehicle used for the trip on the night of September 19, 2006. There was no way this could be a coincidence, an old-school bus seat fragment matching the vehicle involved in the disappearance of 18 students, found right in the Siphon Draw Basin, the area where SAR had once noted unexplained burn marks. When the internal report on the partially burned bus seat was forwarded to the interim PCSO commander, who had taken over the position after Cole retired in 2019, the reaction was almost immediate. The new commander recognized that this was no longer a random discovery, but the first physical clue directly linking the 2021 wildfire to the 2006 mass disappearance. He immediately contacted DPS, requesting evidence validation and consideration to reopen file CR 061,472 as a cold case. Within days, DPS transferred the case to the Arizona State Cold Case Unit, a unit recently expanded following the 2020 reform program aimed at reviewing stalled cases due to lack of resources or procedural errors. That same week, the Cold Case Unit formally requested that PCSO hand over all files, evidence, and related data for the Clearwater Ridge case to facilitate reinvestigation. After 15 years gathering dust in storage, file CR 061,472 was pulled back into the light, not by a deliberate investigative breakthrough, but by a natural event. The wildfire had inadvertently exposed the charred bus seat fragment, the last remaining piece of the vehicle that had carried 18 children who vanished on a moonless night in 2006. When Arizona's cold case unit confirmed that the serial number on the burned seat fragment matched bus CRB-12, the severity of the case immediately escalated beyond state jurisdiction. DPS submitted a request for federal assistance to the FBI, citing the multi-victim disappearance nature and the potential for interstate criminal activity under federal cooperation frameworks. Just 3 days later, the FBI Phoenix Field Office deployed a joint team consisting of an evidence response team, terrain specialists, soil analysis technicians, and 2 veteran agents experienced in cases involving vehicles disposed of in the Southwest desert. The operation was given the code name Operation Canyon Echo, implying that the investigation's goal was to trace the remaining echoes from a disappearance thought to have gone silent 15 years earlier. The AIR-T began by creating a full terrain model of the Siphon Draw Basin and Peralta Canyon using mobile LiDAR mounted on light helicopters. This technology, which did not exist at the time of the 2006 incident, allowed them to generate a 3D map accurate to the smallest surface variations. When the data was loaded into analysis software, specialists identified several small oval depressions that did not match natural erosion or wildfire patterns. Notably, there was one depression approximately 4.2 meters wide, slightly more than half the length of a school bus, located just over 150 meters north of where the seat fragment was found. This depression had compressed and inwardly sloped soil edges at an unusual angle, suggesting impact from a heavy object. The LiDAR team marked this area as Anomaly A17 and handed it over to the GPR team for subsurface survey. GPR units were dragged on lines across the ground in a grid pattern, using frequencies suitable for penetrating to depths over 1 meter. As the radar passed over A17, the screen displayed unusual return curves. Instead of naturally layered loose soil, the signal showed a highly compressed layer, forming a large uniform mass, typically seen only when soil has been excavated and refilled over time. The depth from the surface to the compressed layer ranged from 80–100 cm too deep for casual camping or fire pits, but consistent with deliberate burial of large objects or crime scene processing. Scanning adjacent areas to the west revealed 2 more similar but smaller compressed zones, also oval-shaped and apparently impacted during the same time frame. These anomalies did not appear in the 2006 published geological records for the area, further proving they were not natural changes. After integrating LiDAR and GPR data, the FBI ERT held a quick field briefing under the long shadows of the Superstition Mountains to plan excavation. Due to the steep and uneven terrain, they opted for a fan excavation strategy, digging in a fan pattern, starting from the center of Anomaly A17 and expanding outward to the GPR-identified zones. This technique allowed layered digging, preserving object structure, while enabling the search for small traces buried under multiple soil layers. The ERT set up 12 stakes forming 3 expanding fan arcs with radii from 6 to 14 meters. They strung lines dividing each segment into 20-degree sections, ensuring every shovel stroke was in a recordable and reconstructible position. A specialized truck brought soil screening equipment, evidence examination tables, and sun shelters that same afternoon. To avoid destroying scent traces, no heavy vehicles were allowed into the zone until the topsoil was removed by hand. While preparing tools, one FBI agent quietly told the ERT team leader that A17's proportions highly matched a site where someone had attempted to conceal a large object. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood that Operation Canyon Echo might be on the verge of the case's most significant discovery. Once the excavation plan was approved and a direct reporting line established to FBI Phoenix headquarters, Canyon Echo officially shifted to the focused search phase, marking the first time in 15 years that an authorized law enforcement agency revisited the question PCSO had dismissed: what really happened in the Copper Canyon Desert on the night of September 19, 2006. The excavation team began work at 7:10 a.m. the next day, when the sunlight was still low and the desert heat had not yet baked the softened soil scorched by the wildfire weeks earlier. FBI forensic anthropology specialists, veterans of mass grave excavations in New Mexico, Nevada, and 2 major cases in Texas, donned lightweight protective suits, dust goggles, and entered Anomaly A17, where both GPR and LiDAR had confirmed abnormally deep compressed soil. They worked with light tools, archaeological trowels, soft bristle brushes, small shovels, and specialized soil sifters. In long-buried concealment cases, the top layer's priority is not finding the main object, but detecting signs of human intervention, straight-cut lines, disrupted sediment order, or streaks of mixed ash, things nature cannot create. Just 10 minutes into removing the surface layer, lead anthropologist Dr. Lavinia Ross noticed the soil texture at the pit's center was completely different from surrounding areas. The top layer was loose pale gray from rain and fire impact, but the immediate subsurface was dense dark brown clumping, characteristic of soil excavated and recompacted. As the team began sifting bucketfuls of soil, tiny ash particles appeared along with small black carbonized fragments, material burned at high temperatures. While Ross took notes, a technician suddenly froze upon spotting something in the sifting frame, no larger than a pinky fingernail. A small ivory-white bone fragment with a worn end and slightly curved edge. Ross approached immediately, lifting it with tweezers under sunlight for examination. With a glance, she knew it could not be from local wildlife. The internal spongy structure, curvature, and calcium opacity matched human bone exposed to heat. She did not voice the conclusion hastily, only requesting the position be marked and digging continue in the fan pattern. Within minutes, a second fragment appeared, about 7 mm larger, with charred gray-black edges from unstable heat exposure. Then, a third, a flat small bone segment from a juvenile's hand or foot. When the fourth was found, this one with intact microscopic pores and not fully burned, Dr. Ross halted work, ordered the scene perimeter secured, and reported to the Canyon Echo commander, "We have remains, most likely human, and most likely Clearwater Ridge victims." Following the report, the team shifted to stricter excavation protocols, expanding the pit radius and layering soil by depth. At around 40 centimeters depth, they began finding deformed burned metal segments, identified as school bus seat support bars, contracted from high heat, but retaining partial structure. Along the pit edge, forensic technicians recovered 3 black zip ties, 14–16 centimeters long, 2 charred and 1 nearly intact in its nylon core, though lacking elasticity. Zip ties are common items, but finding 3 in a pit with human bone and bus seat fragments made it clear they were likely used to restrain hands or secure someone on the bus, or to bind objects during transport. Digging deeper into the second compressed layer, around 80–100 centimeters below the surface, the team uncovered partially burned dark blue fabric scraps, matching the uniform material worn by Clearwater Ridge students in 2006. The burned fabric lacked clear fiber structure, but retained pigment in spots. Nearby, they found a curved plastic piece, possibly a seat edge or armrest, with a product code partially readable to 2 characters, but field analysis confirmed the material exactly matched the high-grade PVC used in CRB-12 buses. At this point, the ERT halted shovel digging and switched to finer tools to avoid damaging bone structure. They began collecting soil blocks suspected of containing remains into stainless trays for transfer to the temporary investigation tent, where cleaning was done with ultra-soft brushes and water filtration. The biological evidence agent recommended soil DNA extraction, a technique for recovering DNA from soil around burned or decomposed bone, extremely useful in old cases with heavily destroyed evidence. Samples were taken from 5 points in the burial pit, sealed in specialized tubes, and sent to the FBI's mobile lab in Apache Junction. Preliminary results left everyone silent. Usable DNA was found in 3 samples, a rare stroke of luck after 15 years. When compared to the 2006 family victim DNA database, one sample matched the profile of Elias Turner, one of the 18 missing students that night. This discovery confirmed not only the identity of the remains, but also that the Siphon Draw Basin site was where part of the victim group was disposed of or buried after disappearance. But what stunned the specialists was not just finding human bone, but the burn degree. Many fragments had deformed edges, some with micro-explosions, signs of exposure to very high but uneven or intermittent heat, unlike controlled cremation. This indicated victims were burned on site using crude methods, direct open flame possibly from wood or flammable materials, without temperature control equipment. Many bones were black externally, but gray-white inside, proving the fire did not reach full carbonization. Additionally, interspersed ash showed inconsistent colors, some wood ash, some plastic burn ash, and some from organic material. This fit an amateur disposal method, perpetrators burning multiple items simultaneously: fabric, ties, seats, possibly backpacks or papers, in an effort to destroy all traces. When the deepest layer of the pit was fully exposed, there was no room for doubt. A mass burial site of significant area containing scattered remains, burned materials, zip ties, bus seat fragments, fabric samples, ash, and compressed soil, clearly refilled by human effort, not natural processes. Dr. Ross stood at the pit edge, sweat soaking her temples, but her voice remained steady as she reported via radio. Scene #3 confirmed. This is a burial and burn site, highly likely connected to the Clearwater Ridge case. No one responded. There was no need to say more. After 15 years, the truth was beginning to surface from the hot soil of Siphon Draw Basin, from a scene that should have been discovered in the first days, if the 2006 investigation had not been halted from within. That confirmation forced the FBI into the next phase, not just excavation, but full reconstruction of the entire incident using technology unavailable in 2006. Discovering Scene #3 prompted Operation Canyon Echo to trigger a complete review of old data with 2021 tools to precisely match the travel route of bus CRB-12 and determine the chain of events leading to its final stop. The technical analysis team started by compiling 3 core previously fragmented data sources from the old files: CCTV footage from the Apache Junction gas station at 9:12 p.m., the final cell pings from students on 2 towers at the town's eastern edge, and maps of possible routes from Highway 88, turning onto Peralta Road, overlooked in the initial investigation. These data points, too weak or disconnected in 2006, were input into Chronopath Digital Journey Simulation software, an FBI tool for reconstructing vehicle movement based on time intervals, average speeds, terrain, and route probabilities. As the software ran the 3D simulation, a travel path emerged on the high-resolution Superstition Mountains terrain map. The simulation anchored at 9:12 p.m. in Apache Junction, then using pings from the AJ East cell tower, determined the bus headed northeast within 3 to 4 minutes after leaving the camera, exactly when phones were mass shut off between 9:14 and 9:18 p.m. This was the first match. The software then calculated reasonable speeds for a school bus on Peralta Road's dirt surface at night, combined with the bus's absence from any traffic cameras en route to Phoenix. Results showed the bus almost certainly turned north onto Peralta Road no more than 2 minutes after leaving the gas station. More crucially, when the simulation reached the marked Scene #1, where curved skid marks and drag traces were noted in 2006, Chronopath determined that if the bus was traveling 1822 miles per hour on dirt and impacted from behind, it would produce a skid curve with 1723 degrees deviation, nearly identical to the angle recorded by SAR. Match probability reached 93%, an extraordinarily high accuracy for 15-year-old data simulation. The FBI then ran alternate scenarios without a pursuing SUV or voluntary turn. Both yielded mismatches of 38 to 64%. This reinforced the forced stop as the only scenario fitting physical evidence. The analysis team next incorporated 2006 timeline data, phone signal lost time, GPS gaps in two PCSO patrol vehicles, and SUV tire track directions sniffed by K9 on the first search night. When integrated, Chronopath reconstructed a continuous route. Bus leaves gas station closely followed by one or two dark SUVs, forced left turn onto Peralta Road, travels additional 0.6 to 0.8 miles, forced stop at scene-1, then directed or coerced further into the basin leading to later scene-3. Notably, the software was not programmed to seek a forced stop. The algorithm relied purely on position, time, and physical trace matching. The simulation independently concluding forced stop as the best fit proved the 2006 scene evidence was strong enough for immediate conclusion, if not ignored or downplayed. After completing the route, the FBI presented the simulation to the investigation team. The screen showed the bus in 3D space, traveling a dark dirt road, trailed by two moving light sources simulating SUV headlights. At the forced stop point, the software recreated physics-based impact: bus veers right, driver steers, vehicle skids, then stops in thick dust. Agents stood silent as Chronopath ran to the route's end, disappearing exactly at scene-3. No one spoke, but all understood this model did not just recreate a journey, it exposed a truth obscured for 15 years. One analysis team agent noted in the report, the 2006 timeline now aligns with physical evidence with high probability. The forced stop is no longer theoretical, it is demonstrable. For the first time since September 19, 2006, what was once dismissed as speculation was now matched by modern technology, showing vehicle coercion was no longer hypothesis but a data-provable event. From that moment, Operation Canyon Echo moved beyond piecing together scattered clues into a complete reconstruction of the bus's entire journey, a foundation essential for identifying missing links between the forced stop and the final burial site. It was precisely from that gap that the FBI posed the next question: where had the bus and the victims been during the time between scene-1 and scene-3? Instead of waiting for a direct clue, the investigative team shifted to a systematic elimination method, screening more than 30 abandoned structures around the foothills of the Superstition Mountains to determine the possibility of an intermediate stop. When the Chronopath model indicated that the bus may have continued moving after scene-1 before being taken to Siphon Draw Basin, the agents began scanning secondary trails leading southeast, where a 2006 map noted scattered hunter cabins and old campsites that had previously fallen outside the scope of the initial investigation. Among them was a wooden cabin located about 1.6 miles as the crow flies from Peralta Road, coordinates right on the western slope of Weaver's Needle, a massive natural needle-shaped rock formation famous for its sheer climbing routes. The cabin appeared faintly in a 1998 Forest Service land survey file, but had never been mentioned in any administrative report from 2000 onward. When the ER team approached the cabin, they immediately recognized it was not a temporary shelter, but a solidly built wooden cabin with steel-reinforced corners, estimated to have been constructed in the 1970s, 1980s. The cabin was approximately 18 square meters, with a north-facing entrance door, two small windows boarded shut, an old rusted tin roof, and behind it a sunken dirt clearing, as if it had once been used for campfires or storing gear. The cabin's location was particularly advantageous for a secret stopover. It lay in a narrow ravine obscured from the main climbing routes, difficult to spot from a distance, and about 200 meters from the nearest trail over rugged rocky terrain. Upon entering the cabin, the ER team immediately noticed signs of human use: an old wooden platform, a few rusted metal drums, severed pieces of nylon cord, and rotted rope. But what drew their attention most was the cabin floor, old wooden planks, yet at the four corners and center, there were dark brown stains in irregular blotches. With experience from dozens of similar excavations, Dr. Ross immediately requested a luminol test. When the lights were turned off and luminol sprayed in a fine mist over the surface, Those blotches glowed with the characteristic blue-green hue, evidence of old blood, heavily oxidized but still chemically reactive. The cabin was immediately designated Scene-4. The floorboards were drilled to extract 6 core samples from the 6 points with the strongest luminol reactions. Some samples were rotted, but when thin layers of wood were separated, technicians discovered dark brown spots and dried streaks embedded in the grain, consistent with blood that had soaked deep into the porous material. Extracting the samples required extreme precision to avoid destroying any remaining DNA. The wood layers were placed in special tubes containing DNA stabilization solution and rushed to the FBI's mobile lab. In addition to the blood, forensics recovered a single 2.5 cm long hair strand caught in a floorboard crack near the wall, light brown without a root, indicating it had been forcibly pulled during violent movement rather than naturally shed. The hair was placed in a sealed glass vial. As the cabin was searched more thoroughly, the team found scrape marks on the floor in one corner, as if a heavy object had been dragged or a person pulled across it. 3 cut segments of nylon cord were collected in a corner of the cabin, 2 of which showed unusual stretching marks at the ends, typical signs of restraints being forcibly broken. Additionally, a small yellow fabric scrap, thin and covered in ash, was found very similar to the seat upholstery recovered at Scene-3. All samples were cataloged, sealed, and documented on site. Within 48 hours, the temporary lab released the first DNA results from the cabin floorboard samples. Of the 6 core samples, only 2 yielded amplifiable DNA. When the DNA profiles were compared to the 2006 Victim Family Reference Database, both samples matched 2 of the missing students, Nathan Cross and Miguel Reyes, the 15 and 16-year-old boys who had been sitting in the middle rows of bus CRB 12. The probability of match reached 99.97%, a figure that could not be explained by error or coincidence. With these results, the abandoned cabin was confirmed not as a random location, but as a place where 2 of the victims had been present in peril, likely detained or transferred. Further analysis showed the blood in the cabin lacked high-velocity spatter patterns, typical of fatal wounds, more consistent with oozing from abrasions or falls prior to being moved elsewhere. This supported the hypothesis that the cabin served as a holding site, a transfer point where victims were temporarily held to split groups or await further instructions. The cabin's architecture, few windows, only one exit, boarded windows, and secluded ravine location was ideal for securing a group without risk of detection. The zip ties at Scene-3, nylon cords at the cabin, and burned seat fabric all aligned with known procedures for group separation in illegal human transport cases in Arizona during the 2000s. The fact that the Weaver's Needle cabin lay directly on the simulated chronopath route further solidified the conclusion. The bus or victim groups had passed through the cabin before reaching the burial pit. When the DNA results were presented to the Operation Canyon Echo Command, the cabin was officially entered into the case file as Scene-4, holding site, confirming it was not merely a random abandoned structure, but an intermediate point in the journey of the bus and its victims. The identification of Scene-4 closed a major gap between the forced stop scene and the mass grave, making the reconstruction of the night of disappearance more seamless than ever. With every blood-stained plank, every hair caught in the floorboards, and every biological trace collected from the cabin, Operation Canyon Echo advanced another step in unraveling the chain of events that had been concealed beneath 15 years of silence. It was the emergence of this holding site that led the investigative team to the unavoidable question: who had brought the victims here, and how? To answer that, the FBI had to turn to the only remaining source of information from inside the organization that carried out the act. In late October 2021, an individual designated by the FBI as Witness X was removed from an Arizona state prison for interrogation, after confirmation that he had operated within the Sunset Syndicate from 2004-2012 and was likely a direct link connecting Scene-1, the Weaver's Needle cabin, and the mass grave at Siphon Draw Basin. He was brought to a federal interview room in Phoenix, where the chill from the air conditioning contrasted with the heavy silence of the agents, waiting to hear a story they knew could untie the knot of the entire case. Witness X began bluntly, "I'll tell you everything, but my name doesn't go on anything." When asked why, he just shrugged. The people involved in that they don't forget. After receiving confidentiality assurances, he began describing in detail what he knew, 12 key points that the FBI later confirmed matched the timeline, physical evidence, and scene analysis. Point 1. Orders from someone in law enforcement. Witness X said that night, he and 2 others were urgently summoned by a high-level source who had previously assigned jobs to the syndicate. This person, according to his description, wore sheriff's department gear, talked like someone who gave orders, and announced there was a shipment of kids to receive. Point 2. Directed to Peralta Road. He said they were sent to a low-lying area near Peralta Road, where 2 patrol units would bring the kids. The location closely matched the coordinates identified by Chronopath as the forced bus stop. Point 3. 2 patrol units arrived first. Witness X recounted that when he arrived, 2 patrol units were already waiting, lights off, and in the darkness he could only see silhouettes, figures in uniform. There was no bus at that point, just 2 white SUVs with green stripes. This matched Rico Velasquez's 2014 statement, a lead previously ignored by PCSO. Point 4. Received 18 students from the back seats of the patrol units. He described it clearly. The kids were crammed into the back seats of the 2 vehicles, no crying, no screaming, like they were dazed. One detail aligned with cabin forensics, minor blood traces, not high-velocity spatter, suggesting victims were subdued, but not fatally injured. Point 5. Split the group at the handover point. He said his group was ordered to divide the 18 students into 2 groups. One group of 9 taken to the old cabin at the base of Weaver's Needle, the other taken elsewhere. This perfectly matched the Weaver's Needle cabin, where victim DNA was found, and broken nylon cords appeared. Point 6. Cabin used as temporary detention. He described the cabin almost identically to forensic findings, windows boarded, dark interior, nylon cords, and a few old items. He said, "We left the kids there, locked the door from outside." This was the exact holding site identified by the FBI. Point 7. One victim resisted and was dragged down. Witness X described a teenager who tried to run for the door and was pulled down into a corner by one of the guards. This matched the scrape marks on the cabin floor and oxidized blood stains. Point 8. Orders to move the group after a few hours. He said, orders came at dawn to take the group in the cabin deeper into the basin. The location he described, flat ground but shielded by rocks, closely matched scene #3, where the mass grave was found. Point 9. Used zip ties to restrain hands before moving. Witness X stated clearly, "We used black zip ties to keep each kid's hands so they wouldn't run." This exactly matched the 3 partially burned zip ties found at scene #3. Point 10. Clean everything order from the commander. He recounted that the person giving orders, wearing uniform, not syndicate, demanded leave nothing behind, nothing identifiable. When asked if that included burning, Witness X nodded, "Yeah, that's what they wanted." Point 11. Burned overnight, using dry wood and fuel. He described how his group gathered wood, poured fuel on the site, and burned for a long time, maybe half a day. This matched scene #3 forensic characteristics, incompletely burned bones, mixed ash types, signs of non-professional burning. Point 12. Covered with dirt and left just before dawn. Witness X accurately described the grave depth, estimating half an adult's height, equivalent to about 80–100 centimeters, matching GPR and excavation results. He said, "We covered it with dirt, erased tracks, and left. No one came back." When asked if he recognized any officers in the patrol units, Witness X said he didn't dare look at faces but remembered the commanding voice sounded exactly like police, the kind used to giving orders. When the FBI presented key timeline markers, CCTV 912, signal loss 914, 918, Scene #1 location, Weaver's Needle Cabin, burial pit. Witness X confirmed each one, even providing the footpath his group used to move victims deeper into the basin. That route matched 90% of the LiDAR terrain map and chronopath simulation. As the interview ended, the agents in the room were speechless for several seconds. Witness X's account didn't just match the physical evidence, it matched layer by layer, location, timing, behavior, disposal techniques, and especially the presence of 2 patrol units that had been suspected since 2006. One agent wrote in the report, "This account aligns with evidence at every critical axis. It is not a story, it is a reconstruction." And so, after 15 years, the final piece of the night of disappearance emerged, not from cameras, not from data, but from the confession of a participant who had been hands-on in a night the entire Copper Canyon community had tried to forget. Deputy Aaron Phillips was summoned to the FBI Phoenix office 3 days after Witness X's statement, not as a suspect, but as the only person in the entire PCSO in 2006 who had documented every irregularity he witnessed. As he entered the interview room, Phillips, now 51, gray at the temples, face etched with years of silent service, carried a small wooden box. He placed it on the table without a word. The lead agent began. "We know you kept a personal record. We need the full truth." Phillips looked down at his hands, nodded slightly, then opened the box. Inside was an old black notebook, edges worn, pages yellowed with age. "I wrote everything down," he said, "because I knew one day, this day would come." He began recounting the story that for 15 years had never been told in its true form. The first point he raised was Sheriff Daniel Cole's direct interference in the investigation process on the very night of the disappearance. Phillips recounted that after the SARE team discovered the curved skid marks at Scene-1, he requested immediate submission of evidence and scene photos to DPS for analysis. But Cole stepped in and said firmly, "No need. This isn't a crime scene." Phillips said at that moment he felt Cole wasn't simply underestimating, but deliberately downplaying the scene's significance. The second, and most shocking point was the story of the deleted GPS data. Phillips described how at 4 a.m. on September 20, 2006, the IT technician reported to him that GPS data from patrol units 2L19 and 2L22 was missing precisely during the 9:12, 9:57 p.m. window. He immediately took the report to Cole. Cole glanced at it for a few seconds and said, "Dismiss it. Don't put it in the file." When Phillips objected, Cole looked him in the eye and said in a tone Phillips never forgot, "Do you want to keep your career here or not? Remove it from the report." Phillips admitted that was the first moment he realized something was being deliberately concealed rather than an administrative error. The third point was the alteration of duty logs. Phillips detailed the moment he noticed the patrol route log page had been replaced with handwriting not belonging to the on-duty deputy. When he brought the page to Cole suggesting handwriting analysis, Cole snatched it from his hand, folded it, and said, "I'll handle it myself. No one else checks." When Phillips asked why, Cole replied, "You don't understand the bigger picture." Phillips wrote that exact quote in his personal notebook that night. The fourth point, direct pressure from Cole to falsify official reports. Phillips recounted the moment. Cole ordered all SAR reports to omit details about the 2 dark SUVs, the gas station witness, and the unusual tire tracks leading into the woods. He demanded the original reports be edited to say, "Bus voluntarily left route." I refused to sign the revised version. This too was recorded in Phillips's journal. The fifth point, Cole directly ordered evidence not be sent for analysis. Phillips confirmed that the first ash sample collected from Siphon Draw Basin was fully suitable for testing, and he had prepared the lab submission form, but Cole tore it up in front of him and said, "If we send evidence, we'll have to open a criminal case. I won't allow it." That statement was written verbatim in Phillips's personal journal, with date and time. The sixth point, Cole threatened deputies who objected. Phillips said 3 other deputies had joined him in requesting an internal investigation expansion, but after that morning's meeting, Cole met each one privately and told them they were crossing the line. 2 were transferred to administrative duties within a week. Phillips believed that was why many deputies remained silent for years afterward. The 7th point. Cole personally altered the report sent to the mayor. Phillips confirmed that the report he prepared, based on the actual timeline, including forced stop, SUV tracks and GPS data, was replaced by Cole with an 8-page no-foul play version sent to Mayor Barker. He clearly remembered Cole standing in the meeting room, placing the real report in a drawer, and presenting the altered one to the group. The 8th point. Phillips's journal became the sole remaining record of the truth. When asked why he hadn't submitted the journal earlier, Phillips replied, "No one would believe a deputy going against the sitting sheriff. I knew if I turned it in then, it would disappear along with me." He then slid the black notebook toward the FBI. The notebook contained over 200 dated entries, each with time, location, and exact quotes from those involved. Many entries matched perfectly with the 2021 reconstructed timeline, Witness X's statement, the burial pit scene, and the Weaver's Needle cabin. One entry left the agents silent for a long time. 9:03 a.m., Cole said not to mention the abandoned cabin in any future reports. He wanted no record that PCSO had ever sent a unit to check that area. The cabin Phillips referred to was the exact Weaver's Needle cabin excavated by the FBI 15 years later. As the interview concluded, one agent said quietly, "You understand your statement changes everything." Phillips just sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I've held the truth for 15 years. I was only waiting for someone who wanted to hear it." Phillips's black journal, the evidence never included in official files, was formally logged, digitally scanned, and became a critical document linking all 2006 misconduct to the truth. Operation Canyon Echo had just reconstructed, and that testimony became the turning point that shifted the investigation from searching for victims to pursuing those who had concealed the crime. At the FBI Phoenix headquarters, the coordination room for Operation Canyon Echo had transformed into a space covered with maps, terrain models, crime scene photos, and a timeline board stretching nearly the entire length of the wall. The scattered pieces of the Clearwater Ridge case, which no one had bothered to put together for 15 years, were now laid out on the conference table in sequence, making the entire story, from the forced stop at Peralta Road, to the cabin at Weaver's Needle, to the mass grave at Siphon Draw Basin, emerge as a complete reconstruction so thorough that there was no room left for doubt. The final meeting before requesting arrest warrants was held in early November 2021. The analysis team began by presenting the chain of physical crime scenes. Scene #1 at Peralta Road proved that bus CRB-12 was forcibly stopped by impact from behind, based on curved skid marks, drag traces, and physical simulation analysis via Chronopath, confirming it with 93% accuracy. Scene #4 at the Weaver's Needle cabin showed oxidized blood traces from 2 victims, drag marks, severed nylon rope, and a temporary detention environment consistent with Witness X's description. Scene #3 at Siphon Draw Basin contained charred remains, zip ties, pieces of bus seats, plastic ash, and wood ash, with soil DNA matching Elias Turner's profile, confirming that at least one victim had been brought there and processed. When the 3 scenes were projected connected in a 3D LiDAR map, the movement paths between them matched the vehicle trajectory model reconstructed by software, forming the backbone of the entire reconstruction. Next, the forensics team presented the chain of technological evidence. CCTV at Apache Junction at 9:12 p.m. captured the bus, leaving the station with 2 dark-colored SUVs behind it. Cell towers recorded the final pings from students' phones heading toward Peralta Road, and a simultaneous signal blackout from 9:18 p.m. Manually deleted GPS data from 2 PCSO patrol vehicles perfectly overlapped with the dead zone window, a detail ignored in 2006, but now a critical piece proving the involvement of undeclared vehicles. Mapping analyses proved the bus never followed the route back to Phoenix, but turned left onto a dirt road, exactly as described by Witness X. Then came the chain of statements presented by the investigation team in order of importance. Witness X provided 12 accurate descriptions of receiving 18 students from 2 patrol vehicles, the grouping process, detention in the cabin, transport to the basin, and disposal by burning and burial. All matched the physical evidence. Rico's 2014 statement, previously dismissed by PCSO, was re-examined and found to match 2 key points: 2 patrol vehicles and 18 kids. The bus driver's statement, though contradictory, indicated the appearance of blue and red lights and the command "pull over," consistent with the forced stop. And most crucially, the FBI presented Deputy Phillips' statement, confirming that Sheriff Daniel Cole had coerced report alterations, blocked evidence analysis, concealed GPS data, replaced patrol logs, and declared no foul play in complete contradiction to the actual scene. Phillips' black notebook, with 200 detailed entries, including dates, times, and verbatim quotes, was regarded as the document that shattered the case's cover-up. Each journal entry was cross-referenced with evidence and the timeline. The astonishing matches left the grand jury with no reason to doubt its authenticity. After synthesizing the 3 main chains, crime scenes, technology, and statements, the reconstruction team rebuilt the entire 2006 Clearwater Ridge case in a seamless model. 9:12 p.m. The bus leaves the gas station. 9:14. 18 p.m., tailed by 2 SUVs and forced onto Peralta Road. 9:20. 23 p.m. Forcibly stopped at scene #1. Victims transferred to 2 patrol vehicles. From there split into 2 groups, one taken to the Weaver's Needle cabin. After a few hours, the cabin group transported to the basin. At the basin, victims processed, burned, and buried at scene #3. This model was presented to the grand jury in the federal conference room in Phoenix. LiDAR images, 3D renderings, soil DNA, cabin blood samples, Witness X's statement, Phillips' journal, and Cole's chain of misconduct were presented over more than 3 hours. The grand jury heard each piece of evidence, each audio segment, each simulation, and was finally asked the decisive question: is there sufficient probable cause to believe that criminal conduct occurred and was concealed by persons in authority? Deliberations lasted less than 40 minutes. When the jury returned, the 4-person said only, yes. Indictments approved. The first arrest warrants were signed immediately, marking the moment the truth stepped from darkness into light, and turning Operation Canyon Echo into one of the largest cold case breakthroughs in Arizona history. The arrest operation for Sheriff Daniel Cole was executed at dawn on November 14, 2021, under the codename Operation Black Meridian, carried out by FBI Phoenix in coordination with U.S. Marshals, to avoid any risk of armed resistance, given that Cole was a once powerful sheriff, familiar with firearms, and well-connected in law enforcement circles. The participating force included 1 ERT unit, 2 federal SWAT teams, and 3 surveillance agents, all positioned in 3 approach vectors to ensure Cole could not escape his suburban home in Gold Canyon, located at the foot of the Superstition Mountains. At 4:18 a.m., SWAT Team Alpha approached the front door, using a doorscope camera to confirm the target's location. Team Bravo circled to the rear through a stone fence, where a side door led to the office. Team Charlie stood ready on the street, tasked with blocking any vehicles leaving the property. When the bullhorn announced, "Federal agents, Sheriff Cole, step outside with your hands visible," there was no response. After 8 seconds of silence, Team Alpha detonated a low-intensity breaching charge on the lock. The door flew open. ERT advanced, flashing lights and shouting surrender demands. Cole was found in the office, wearing a t-shirt, standing next to a small safe with his back to the wall, surrounded from 3 sides. He offered no resistance, only lifted his head, looked at the agents, and said softly, "Finally here." Handcuffs were applied, and Miranda rights were immediately read. As Cole was escorted out, the forensics team entered the house to seize all devices belonging to him. The first item sealed was a Maxtor 250 GB external hard drive in a desk drawer, an old drive over 10 years old, potentially containing deleted but recoverable data. The second was a 2006-era Motorola Razr V3 phone found in an old document box. FBI experts suspected it was the phone Cole used on the night of the disappearance, possibly holding deleted call logs or messages that could still be extracted. The third was a 2006-2007 planner notebook inside the safe. Cole had been trying to open when SWAT entered. The notebook contained numerous handwritten notes and several torn-out pages, leading forensics to assess it as potentially key evidence of coordination between Cole and others involved in the cover-up. After Cole was removed, SWAT shifted focus to 4 deputies who served under him on the 2006 shift. Deputy Harrington, Deputy Moss, Deputy Lewis, and Deputy Crane. All 4 had long been on the FBI's suspect list due to inconsistent 2006 reports and the disappearance of GPS data from patrol units 2L19 and 2L22. Harrington was arrested at his home in Apache Junction. He appeared confused and tried to say, "I was just following orders." Moss was arrested as he was leaving in his pickup truck. He trembled and repeatedly asked, "Did Cole say anything about me?" Lewis remained completely silent, only requesting a lawyer, showing no reaction even as he was cuffed in front of his family. Crane, who had signed the report logging the patrol route on the night of the disappearance, initially protested, claiming he was being framed, but fell silent after the charges were read. In the ART report, the 4 deputies' reactions were noted as varying but uniformly defensive. No one resisted, yet no one appeared completely surprised, as if they knew the investigation would come back one day. Once all 5 suspects were transported to the federal holding facility in Phoenix, the formal charges were announced. Sheriff Daniel Cole faced 7 felony counts, including 1 kidnapping, Class 2 felony, for direct participation or coordination in the abduction of 18 students. 2 conspiracy to commit kidnapping, coordinating with unidentified individuals or organizations in the seizure and transport of victims. 3 evidence, tampering, deleting GPS, seizing evidence, blocking ash testing. 4 obstruction of justice, concealing information, replacing patrol logs, interfering with internal investigations. 5 official misconduct, abusing authority to improperly close the case. 6 falsification of reports, altering content of reports sent to the mayor. 7 conspiracy to commit destruction of evidence, directing disposal by burning and burial. The 4 deputies, Harrington, Moss, Lewis, and Crane, faced lesser but still extremely serious charges. Accessory to kidnapping, complicity in evidence tampering, and obstruction in an active investigation. As the indictment was read, one FBI agent noted Cole's reaction. He stared at the wall without blinking, as if this collapse had begun forming the moment witness X mentioned the 2 patrol vehicles. Before being led to the holding cell, Cole turned to the escorting agent and said a chilling line. "You guys think you've seen the whole truth." Operation Black Meridian concluded at 6:02 a.m. In front of the federal detention facility, the first rays of sunrise illuminated the Superstition Mountains, cold, straight light marking the boundary between 15 years of concealment and the day the crimes began to be exposed. At 6:12 a.m., just 10 minutes after Cole was removed from his home, the FBI shifted the focus of Operation Black Meridian to the second target, Mayor Joseph Barker and his wife Linda Barker. Their home was in an upscale neighborhood in South Gold Canyon, with a private security gate and surrounding cameras. Thus, the FBI employed an encirclement entry tactic, simultaneously surrounding all 4 sides to prevent any document destruction attempts. 3 unmarked FBI SUVs stopped at the gate, while 1 SWAT team scaled the rear wall with ladders and another approached from the east via a golf cart path. The area was sealed in under 20 seconds, the commanding agent announced over the bullhorn. FBI Mayor Barker opened the door immediately. 2 shielded agents advanced up the stone steps, while the rear team prepared to breach glass if Barker delayed. Inside, body cameras captured Barker attempting to stuff files into a desk drawer while Linda closed her laptop and unplugged it. When the second demand was made, the door swung open. Barker raised his hands, offering no resistance but his face ashen. Linda stood behind him, hands trembling slightly. SWAT quickly cuffed both and removed them for safety before the forensics team entered. The search was conducted under a warrant issued the previous night, based on formal charges of corruption, criminal concealment, and collusion in the Clearwater Ridge case. Barker's office, a large room with wooden shelves and locked file cabinets, became the focal point. Within minutes, forensics agents discovered a wall safe behind a painting near the window. The safe was not large, but secured with an electronic code. When Barker was asked for the code, he hesitated, glanced at his wife, and said, "I want a lawyer." SWAT used a specialized safe-breaching tool to open it in 40 seconds. Inside was not cash, as many expected, but sealed, nylon-wrapped financial documents, bank records, transaction statements, printed emails, and a small gray notebook. The early pages recorded routine City Hall meetings, but the middle section listed illegal deposits from 3 sources: a shell company in Mesa, a security consulting fund in Scottsdale, and a personal account linked to the Sunset Syndicate. The largest, $175,000, was deposited in October 2006, 3 weeks after Barker approved Cole's no-foul play report and ordered the complete halt of SAR operations in Copper Canyon. The notebook also contained a handwritten note: T. Done. No more search. Payment confirmed. Agents immediately flagged the C for analysis. It most likely referred to Cole, who had declared no criminal activity in the morning meeting of September 20, 2006. When forensics accessed Linda's laptop, they found a hidden folder with 42 emails related to logistical coordination between the mayor's office and an encrypted address previously monitored by DEA for syndicate ties. One email dated September 18, 2006, one day before the disappearance, read, "We need local clearance for the route. Sheriff must ensure no interference." This, combined with the deleted GPS data and the investigation shutdown order, formed a clear chain. Barker had used political power to ensure Cole could control all information related to the disappearance, preventing DPS or FBI involvement in exchange for payments shielding syndicate activities. Linda Barker was not merely a bystander. Her laptop contained a PDF titled "Agenda Emergency Meeting," with her handwritten note, "Need public statement ready when Cole closes case." One forensics agent, upon reading it, immediately said they were prepared before the search was even stopped. When the formal arrest warrants were read, Barker protested, "I'm not involved. I only followed the sheriff's recommendation." But the agent countered, "Documents show you received syndicate money at the exact time you signed the investigation shutdown. You are accountable under the law." Charges against Joseph Barker included 1. Corruption. Accepting money from a criminal organization to influence public decisions. 2. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, colluding to facilitate abduction, transport, and detention of victims. 3. Cover-up and obstruction of justice, concealing truth, manipulating reports, blocking SAR teams and federal agencies. Linda Barker faced lesser charges, facilitating corruption and conspiracy to obstruct, for holding documents and assisting communications. As the vehicle carrying the Barkers left their luxurious neighborhood, neighbors opened doors and watched in confusion, unaware of what was happening. But for the FBI, this was simply the final logical answer to a 15-year mystery. The Clearwater Ridge case had not only been buried in the hot basin soil, it had also been locked away in the powerful offices of Gold Canyon until this morning. The grand jury hearing was held in the federal courthouse in Phoenix on November 22, 2021. Just 8 days after all key suspects, Sheriff Cole, his 4 deputies, Joseph Barker and his wife, were arrested in Operation Black Meridian. The lead federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcy Hallowell, entered the room with a nearly 2-inch thick file folder labeled CR061472, Federal Indictment Proposal, 37 pages. Inside the hearing, 23 grand jury members sat in 2 rows, observing a meticulously prepared presentation to determine whether there was sufficient evidence to formally indict in the Clearwater Ridge case. Hallowell opened by describing the case, a 2006 mass disappearance of 18 students, a file improperly shut down, and a chain of evidence showing collusion between public authorities and organized crime. Following the introduction, she moved to the first section, presenting all 4 physical crime scenes. She displayed images of scene #1 at Peralta Road, curved skid marks, drag traces, and chronopath physical simulation, confirming 93% match to a forced stop scenario. Next was scene #4, Weaver's Needle Cabin, where oxidized blood samples from 2 victims were DNA matched. She showed close-ups of wood cores, spatter patterns, and severed hairs recovered from cracks. Finally, scene #3, the mass grave at Siphon Draw Basin, in completely charred remains, half-burned zip ties, pieces of bus CRB, 12 seats, and soil DNA matching Elias Turner. As these images appeared on the screen, the room's atmosphere grew so heavy that almost no one moved. One juror covered their mouth with a hand, another gripped the chair arm tightly. After the crime scenes, Hallowell moved to technological evidence, 9:12 p.m. CCTV, showing 2 dark SUVs tailing the bus. Cell towers recording mass signal loss from 9:14, 9:18 p.m. toward Peralta Road, deleted patrol vehicle GPS overlapping the dead zone window, and LiDAR plus GPR maps reconstructing the route to the basin. Each piece was shown on detailed slides with charts, directional arrows, and radar images of soil compressed 80, 100 centimeters deep. When reaching the statements section, the hearing room fell so silent that page turning could be heard clearly. Hallowell presented Witness X's testimony, receiving 18 students from 2 patrol vehicles, grouping cabin detention, transport to basin, burning and burial. To prove credibility, she cross-referenced each point with corresponding physical evidence: cabin blood, severed nylon, zip ties, uniform fabric scraps, bus seat fragments, and the grave pit. She then displayed a summary of Rico's 2014 statement, ignored by PCSO, to show Witness X's account was not isolated, but matched previously suppressed leads. In the cover-up section, Hallowell placed Phillips' black notebook on the evidence stand, reading entries. Cole's orders blocking ash testing. GPS deletion from reports. Replaced patrol log pages. SAR investigation halt. And no foul play declaration directly quoted from Cole, despite contradictory scene evidence. The grand jury requested to hear a 2006 internal audio secretly backed up by Phillips, Cole's clear, cold voice saying, "If we open a criminal case, everything will blow up. Bury it." When the recording ended, the room remained silent for nearly 30 seconds. Finally came the witness portion. Witness X appeared in a separate room, testifying via video under identity protection. He repeated all 12 points and affirmed under oath that Sheriff Cole was behind the coordination that night. One juror asked, "Are you certain the children came from patrol vehicles?" Witness X replied succinctly, 100%. Their blue and red lights were off, but I saw the reflective county logo in the moonlight. That answer perfectly matched the 0.8-second SUV shadow from 2006 CCTV. After statements, the grand jury reviewed the 37-page indictment proposal. The document listed 9 defendants, 14 charges, and 178 cross-referenced physical and testimonial evidences. Hallowell closed the hearing with, "This was not a disappearance. This was a mass kidnapping, concealed by the very people tasked with protecting the community." The grand jury retired to deliberate. Discussions lasted only 55 minutes, far shorter than comparable complex cases. When they returned, the 4-person stood, looked directly at the prosecutor, and declared, "We conclude there is sufficient cause to indict all 9 defendants named in the presentation." 22 of 23 jurors voted in favor. 1 abstention, no opposition. And thus, after 15 years buried in the hot basin soil and within the halls of power, The Clearwater Ridge case officially entered the criminal prosecution phase. The federal trial for the Clearwater Ridge case opened in early March 2022 in the main courtroom of the U.S. District Court in Phoenix, Arizona, where dozens of reporters, victims' families, and legal experts closely followed every development. The prosecution began with the statement, "This is a trial where science will speak for 18 children who will never return." And indeed, the centerpiece of the proceedings was the forensic battle, a direct confrontation between scientific evidence accumulated over 15 years and the defense team's desperate efforts to dispute each point. The first part presented by the prosecution was the forensic reconstruction at scene #3. Dr. Lavinia Ross took the witness stand, bringing with her a board of photographs showing partially burned bone fragments, a carbonized shell structure, and charts comparing levels of incomplete burning. She pointed out the characteristic reticular thermal fracturing on the bone surface, a sign of uneven burning, commonly seen when bodies are cremated in a campfire environment, perfectly matching witness X's description. "We burned them with wood and crude fuel for many hours." When the defense attorney attempted to suggest that the bone fragments could belong to animals, Ross responded clearly, "Human and animal bone marrow have different microstructural patterns. Here, the lamellar bone structure and spacing perfectly match those of human juveniles." The entire courtroom fell silent. The prosecution moved on to soil DNA extraction, one of the strongest pieces of evidence. Forensic analyst Jeremy Olson presented the process of extracting DNA from soil samples taken at depths of 70–90 centimeters, centrifuged, with STR markers amplified. When he displayed the comparison chart of 16 DNA loci between the soil sample from scene #3 and Elias Turner's family profile, a 99.97% match rate appeared on the screen. The defense attorney attempted to object that soil environments can cause cross-contamination, but Olson immediately replied, "We took control samples from 3 surrounding locations. None contained any human DNA traces. There is no possibility of cross-contamination." The judge's gavel confirmed that the evidence was admitted. The third forensic layer was GPS recovery. An FBI Cyber Division data recovery expert presented the extraction of fragments from an old PCSO server hard drive using bit-level scanning to restore deleted timestamps. When the prosecution displayed the map showing the routes of 2 patrol vehicles, 2 L-19 and 2 L-22, appearing as ghost points, residual coordinate points in the cache memory, the grand jury and the trial jury saw them moving precisely into the Peralta Road area at the time the bus disappeared. The defense argued that recovered GPS is unreliable, but the expert countered immediately. The match rate between the ghost points and cell tower triangulation is 91%. It cannot be coincidence. Next came the cabin blood pattern at scene #4. Forensic blood analyst Denise Harper stood before the court with a 3D model of the cabin. She pointed out the luminol reactive areas, glowing blue, consistent with blood flow from victims being dragged down, not from fatal wounds. This evidence matched witness X's testimony. One of them tried to run and was pulled down. When the defense moved to exclude the evidence because luminol reacts to many substances, Harper replied, "We used confirmatory hemosticks and Kastle-Meyer tests. Both were positive for human hemoglobin." The prosecution continued by presenting the chronopath reconstruction model, projecting the scene of the bus being forced to turn, stopping, and the group being forcibly separated. When the simulation video reached the cabin and basin scenes, several jurors bowed their heads, unable to bear the level of detail in the reconstruction. At that point, the defense team shifted to attacking the witness, specifically witness X, who had provided 12 points that perfectly matched the physical evidence. They accused him of seeking a reduced sentence, but the prosecution countered that every detail of his testimony matched independent physical evidence. The judge allowed the testimony but reminded the jury to rely on science and physical evidence. At the end of the afternoon session, the prosecution called the witness everyone had been waiting for, Deputy Aaron Phillips. He took the stand with a calm demeanor, but his eyes still carried the weight of 15 years. When asked what he had kept for 15 years, Phillips placed a black notebook in front of the prosecutor. He read aloud from it, Cole's orders to disable GPS, requests to alter reports, orders to halt SRR, and replace journal pages. When the prosecutor asked why he had recorded everything, Phillips replied, "Because I knew the truth would be buried, just like those children." The defense stood to object, attempting to force Phillips to admit he had a personal grudge against Cole. But Phillips looked directly at the jury, unflinching. "I have no grudge against anyone. I just can't forget the smell of ash that night, when we walked over it without being allowed to dig deeper." No one in the room moved. The judge simply nodded and said, "The witness may step down." The forensic evidence, technological recovery, witness testimony, and Phillips's journal combined to form an undeniable picture. And by the end of the third day of trial, every defense strategy crumbled under the weight of science and the cold consistency of the truth. The federal sentence in the Clearwater Ridge case was handed down on June 28, 2022, in a packed courtroom where the atmosphere was heavy, as if compressed by 15 years of buried truth. Judge Eleanor Klein opened the session with a reminder. This is not just a criminal case. It is proof that abused power can bury an entire generation of youth, if left unchecked. As each defendant was brought into the room, none retained the appearance of the powerful figures they once were in the community. Daniel Cole, hair white as snow, shoulders slumped, bowed his head as the judge read his sentence. 35 years in federal prison, no federal parole, for charges of kidnapping, conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and official misconduct. The judge said directly to him, "You used your badge to silence justice, and now the law requires you to pay the exact price you stole from 18 young lives." Joseph Barker, the former mayor of Gold Canyon, received the heaviest sentence, life without parole. Life imprisonment without parole, for his key role in using public power to shield organized crime, accepting bribes from the syndicate, and signing the order to halt the investigation that stalled the case for 15 years. When the sentence was read, Barker stood motionless, eyes vacant, as if finally realizing that political power, the thing he once believed was a permanent shield, had vanished in an instant. Linda Barker received 18 years in prison for complicity, aiding concealment, and maintaining communications with the criminal organization. The 4 deputies under Cole received sentences ranging from 18 to 27 years in federal prison, depending on their level of involvement. Harrington 27 years for direct participation in transferring victims. Moss 24 years for colluding and manipulating reports. Lewis 19 years for concealing patrol logs, and Crane 18 years for falsely certifying reports and blocking SR information flow. As the sentences were announced, the victims' families in the gallery embraced one another, some sobbing openly, but not out of revenge, rather because there was finally an official acknowledgement that what they had suspected since 2006 was true. Their children did not vanish randomly. They were abducted, separated into groups, detained and disposed of, and the case was covered up by the very people who were supposed to protect them. After the sentencing, the judge took nearly 10 minutes to read a professional summary, a rare occurrence in criminal trials but necessary because Clearwater Ridge had an impact far beyond a small county. She noted that this was the most typical case in 2 decades of local cover-up, collusion between local government, county sheriff's office, and organized crime had distorted, closed, and buried a mass kidnapping case, with immeasurable legal and ethical consequences. She emphasized the lack in 2006 PCSO of independent cross-check systems, no mechanism to hold the sheriff accountable to state oversight, and no federal standard evidence handling procedures. Following the sentence, the Arizona Attorney General's office, in coordination with the U.S. Department of Justice, released a 62-page report identifying 19 procedural violations by PCSO in 2006 and proposing 11 reform recommendations. One of the biggest changes was the expansion of the Arizona Cold Case Unit, with nearly doubled funding and direct access to DPS labs. allowing the reprocessing of hundreds of stalled cases due to lack of resources. The Department of Justice also issued a directive requiring all Arizona counties to adopt new SARS standards, in which any missing persons case with unusual signs must enter a 3-tier search process with DPS oversight, along with mandatory evidence storage in certified environments. In parallel, the state of Arizona launched the Forensic Integrity Initiative, changing how evidence is collected, stored, and monitored to minimize tampering, while requiring all police units to maintain digitized patrol logs to prevent manual alterations. Before concluding the trial, Judge Klein looked toward the victims' families in the gallery and said, "No sentence will bring the children back, but the justice today will ensure that a night like that September night in 2006 will not repeat in the darkness." Outside the courthouse, the Arizona sun was high and glaring as always, but the feeling in the air was different, lighter, brighter, and as if finally the Clearwater Ridge case, the one deliberately sealed in files, in the burned basin soil, and in the hands of those who concealed it, had found the ending it deserved. The Clearwater Ridge story is not just a criminal case resolved after 15 years, it is also a mirror reflecting many social issues America is facing today: abuse of local power, lack of transparency in law enforcement, and the vital importance of forensic science in protecting justice. When Sheriff Cole ordered the concealment of evidence, such as forcing subordinates to delete GPS data, replace patrol journal pages, and block sending burned ash for analysis, he not only betrayed 18 children, but also the community that trusted him. And when Mayor Barker accepted money from the syndicate and then signed the order to stop SAR, that action reflected the real danger in many small towns. Power concentrated in a small group can easily lead to corruption without independent oversight mechanisms. The truth only surfaced because of 3 factors: forensic science, the persistence of new investigators, and especially the personal journal that Deputy Phillips kept for 15 years. This is a clear reminder that blind consensus is not loyalty. Individual integrity is sometimes the final line between justice and darkness. For America today, the biggest lesson from this case is that small, localized power systems cannot be allowed to operate without external checks. Communities should demand greater transparency in county sheriff operations, body cameras, mandatory GPS storage, public reporting, and independent investigation mechanisms with the power to remove a sheriff if necessary. At the same time, the story reminds us that justice does not exist on its own. It requires people willing to take risks to protect the truth, as Phillips did. Ultimately, Clearwater Ridge underscores the value of forensic science in modern society. When testimony can be distorted and power can be abused, DNA in soil, bloodstains on wood, or in 0.8-second shadow on CCTV become the most honest voices. This is a reminder that in the United States, the truth is sometimes buried very deep, but science will dig it out if people allow it to. If you want to continue following cases uncovered through persistence and science like Clearwater Ridge, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any journey in the pursuit of justice. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the story. See you in the next video, where we will continue to shine light on truths once buried in the darkness.